My sophomore year, we booked Jeremy Zucker. He was playing a day drink in our backyard, and for like a month leading up to it, we would play his song like 3 times at every social event we had. It was college, so we had like 3 events a week. By the time he came, we had 2,000 people in my backyard, and I'd say like 100 of them were singing like every single word about it. Not just because of us playing it, because it's also a great song, and it was popping off on SoundCloud, but people were loving it. So we did that, and I was like, wow, how much more fun was this event because there was live music.
Hey guys, before we start, this is a quick reminder to check out Auxoro Premium, the best deal in premium podcasting. For $5 a month, you get bonus episodes spanning pop culture, love, science, politics, drugs, philosophy, sex, and more. You also gain access to the Unlicensed Therapy series, where I give my unexpert opinion on all things dating, sex, and relationships. Did I mention I'm unqualified? But it's also way cheaper than a real therapist, so you're welcome. On Auxoro Premium, you also get exclusive Ask Me Anything episodes, the ability to suggest topics for the podcast, and the entire back catalog of archived episodes. There's over 25 hours of premium content already posted, and it grows every month. Go to auxoro.supercast.com today. That's AUXORO.supercast.com to get all those benefits on Auxoro Premium for only $5 per month. auxoro.supercast.com to join the premium gang today. Now, on to the episode. Since we were getting into it before we actually started rolling, I feel like dating apps would be an interesting place to start.
Yeah, we can talk a little about
you said that you have friends that have met other people on dating apps, and I also have friends that have met other people on dating apps, and the experience of something like Hinge, Tinder, Bumble, the worst stories make it out into the public. Like Instagram, there's entire Instagram pages dedicated to Hinge mishaps and text back and forth, and girls and guys making videos about dates where shit just does not go well. And when it does work out, you're too busy in a relationship to post a video about it, about like the actual interaction of Hinge. Like you'll post videos with your significant other or photos on Instagram, but it won't be like, we met on Hinge and now it's working out. It's always like, we met on Hinge and fuck this guy or fuck this girl. Do you feel like the dating app world is something beneficial? Like what are your thoughts on meeting people online and getting a virtual profile of something or someone before you actually meet in person for the first time?
I mean, I think that whatever works for that individual is amazing. Like, I think if they've created a platform where people like you and your girlfriend, or my friends and their girlfriends, can meet and have a real genuine connection and fall in love and stay together, then that's incredible.
Where did you and your girlfriend meet?
We met at a party that she was throwing. So
outside of the metaverse.
Outside of the metaverse. However, she loves the metaverse.
Okay.
But yeah, so I actually, before Ashley and I started dating, I had deleted all dating apps off of my phone for like 2 years.
What made you want to do that?
I started to see that it was just becoming like another social media platform where you're on it to, like we were talking about earlier, like care about your engagement, like get the notification. And it was just taking time away from me. And I wanted to dedicate that time to real life experiences.
So you felt like some of the people you were matching with were on Hinge, or which one were you on? Hinge, Tinder, Bumble? Tinder's like the OG slut app. Hinge is more professional, keeping it clean, at least at first.
Yeah, it was Hinge, and then that Raya, the dating app.
Raya,
yeah.
Oh shit! So you had the blue check mark profile on Raya. That I'm in the building with a former Raya user. This is huge. This is big for me. So you felt like there were a lot of people hitting you up that wanted that initial dopamine rush of getting the match, but then once things started to go somewhere, they would flake out before the first date or something like that.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't even know if it like, if I was not over analyzing, but if I was even analyzing it that much, I just simply was looking at, here's some of my previous dating experiences that went well. Here's some of them that just kind of flaked out, like you said. And the ones that went well were all from people who I met organically at events or through friends of friends. And also, like, I'm a quite social person. So I think that's where the individuality comes into play. Like, I love going out and meeting new people. That's like one of my favorite things to do. So that was more natural for me.
Yeah, I feel like the in-person approach for when you're meeting someone for the first time is gonna come back, because we went through a 3 or 4 year period before the pandemic where dating apps were super hot. Everyone had a profile. Everyone was fucking around on Tinder, Bumble, Hinge, one of those. And then the pandemic happened, and then your only option to meet up, if you didn't have a significant other at that point, was to meet someone on Hinge, meet someone on Tinder, and just play the field and see what would happen. If you know, meet up with someone, be 6 feet away in the park, you know, but then go home and make out the same day. So why were we still 6 feet away in the park for the first date? It doesn't matter. Like, why are we worrying about germs then, but not worrying about germs when we're hooking up? But I feel like the in-person first encounter is going to come back, because when you go a year and a half as a society without the social contact in any form, whether it's friends, romance, professional, you start to crave the opposite of that. And I can totally see a flip coming in the near future where people are kind of fed up with the dating apps and going out more to bars, and a resurgence where they say, if I don't meet someone in person, I'm not going to go on the app. Could be totally wrong about that. We could just go deeper and deeper into a virtual dating pool system. But I don't know, something about me thinks that people are fed up with the app experience with dating, at least, unless someone comes along and improves the bottom line experience.
Yeah. I mean, I'd go as far to say that a lot of people are starting to feel fed up with just being on their phones in general, and the dating apps tie into that too. And that's kind of like where I was at too. I've been, over the past couple of years, trying to minimize my screen time as much as humanly possible. Like, even looking at the screen time at the end of the week, or setting those limits. So like only 30 minutes on Instagram a day. And it's because I'm on it for work, I'm on it for friends. And it's just like, I think that the more you're on your phone, the harder it is to be present in real life experiences.
What do you do to minimize screen time? Because I also struggle with that. Posting shit. My mentality is I want to post a photo or a reel and then get off the platform as soon as possible. But inevitably, every other time I end up getting sucked in and spending 30, 45 minutes scrolling through, when I was only supposed to post something, be off in 5 minutes. So what do you do to combat the feeling that your phone is sinking its hooks into you?
Yeah, I've, like I said, used the time limits. It's pretty cool. Apple, and I assume they actually give you some tools that you can use. So I have like 30-minute time limit set on Instagram, and my rule of thumb there is when the 30-minute time limit hits, you get to ignore it once, so that ignores it for like 15 minutes, and then that's like 45 minutes a day max. But I try to stay 45 minutes and under on Instagram, and I deleted TikTok for a while because that's like just you scroll forever. It's even worse than Instagram.
TikTok is like Instagram on all the steroids. Yeah. Everything that Instagram does to you, if you wanted to get the effects of being on Instagram for a year straight, you'd have to be on TikTok for one day, and then you'd feel like you're on Instagram for a year. It's actually insane how good I almost respect TikTok for squeezing my brain in a way, because it's so tight when I'm sucked into a TikTok wormhole that I finish it and I'm like, I just blacked out for an hour just scrolling through videos. It didn't even matter. That's the wildest part about it, is that you don't even know what the next video is going to be, but you know that you're going to watch it and you know you're probably going to be on it. Like, imagine if you took any other thing, if you took wines, for example, and you said, okay, here's a glass of wine, and also here are 10 more glasses of wine, but I'm just going to give you one at a time, and I know you're going to finish every single one. It doesn't matter what they are. Something about the wines, like the taste, the robustness, the way that it smells, the woman sitting across from you holding the glass of wine, whatever it is going to just keep you going and keep you jumping to the next glass. And then 10 glasses later, you look up and you're like, holy shit, I'm fucked up. That's kind of how I feel on a very accelerated timeline with TikTok, where you go through 100 videos and you're like, oh my God, like I'm TikTok fucked up, like whatever you call it. It's like depressed, anxious, but
can't stop.
Just respect for the algorithm, because you're like, damn, like that was a ride. It was something.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting analogy, because you can get addicted to TikTok the same way that you can get addicted to alcohol.
Yeah.
And, well, not the same way.
For a lot of people, it goes hand in hand. They're like, I'm doing both my addictions right now.
Yeah. So I think that it's been really nice to kind of monitor that. And now I have TikTok on my phone and I have a much healthier relationship with it, I think. But it goes back to why I created the Instagram account for Benny Presents recently.
Yeah, shout out to Benny Presents, at Benny Presents.
At Benny Presents.
Go follow it, guys. Do you want to give a brief overview of Benny Presents before we'll dive into the specifics later, but just so people can give it a follow?
Yeah, definitely. Benny Presents is a passion project that I created when I first moved to New York City, wanting to continue hosting events, which is what I did in college and how I got into the music industry. And it is a cause-driven event platform community, and also a little bit of digital marketing on the music side of things. So it's really just like my passion project on the side. But the general concept is we host really fun events with awesome people, and then we take a portion of the proceeds and donate it to a cause that the DJs who we book or the artists who perform care about. So it's been fun.
So I wanted to get into the marketing aspect a little bit. And for you, this is a question that I was interested in picking your brain on, because I never studied marketing to a full extent in school. I took the 101 class that you had to take with any business degree, but wasn't a marketing major. Watch some TikToks in marketing that makes me feel smarter than I am, YouTube videos, things like that. But as a marketing professional who works in the music industry, you build a lot of skills that help you tap into people's attention. And today there are a lot of unethical ways in the market to manipulate human psychology, like scare tactics or misleading data, or a combination of both. So I wanted to ask you, as someone who's deep in marketing in the music industry, how do you think about the ethics of marketing when it comes to music? Like, are there things that you avoid, people that stand out to you where you're like, fuck that, I would never do that? Like, anything that jumps out to you when you think about ethical marketing in music?
I mean, I really think that a lot of it just circles back to being genuine. And I know that's a cliche, but a wise man once said that cliches are cliches because they're true. And that's Mr. Gavin, who's been on your podcast before.
Yeah, cliches are cliches because they're true. Yep, shout out Gavin.
And yeah, I think whether you're an artist or whether you're an event brand, whatever brand you are, it goes back to being genuine and figuring out creative ways to portray that out in the community, whether that's in person or online. And I think specifically with music, and one of the main driving reasons why I'm in the music industry is because music has the ability to really cross a lot of different boundaries and create a lot of positive change and a lot of positive impact in the world. And I think that as an artist or a brand, like really pursuing that, like whatever it is that you really care about and building a community around that is a great way to market yourself. And I think there's kind of like ethically, there's a fine line of like not wanting to be a brand that's just doing charitable things because it looks good for the brand. But you can do that. You can do those things and you can drive profit and revenue and grow a brand while also making a positive impact on the world, not doing it just as like in an unethical way, but like genuinely doing it because you feel like it's the best thing for you. You feel like it's the best thing for your brand and it's the best thing for the world.
Are there any examples in the music industry, and you don't have to say artists in particular, but just certain strategies or through lines to marketing that seem scummy or something that you would avoid, things that maybe drive engagement at a short-term level but aren't great for building long-term relationships that you've seen?
I mean, I think like over the past year, we've seen a lot of charitable concerts, like with the virtual concerts were popping up. And I think there were a lot of brands that just kind of like hopped on the bandwagon where it was like, I mean, I can't think of specific examples necessarily, but like a granola bar brand just like throwing a virtual concert with an artist that doesn't even like granola bars or something. Like there's just some really clear examples, even in like TV ads sometimes where they're doing something that looks like it's a socially responsible thing, but you can feel that it's not really genuine to the brand.
Yeah. So I was actually listening to a podcast with the CEO of Pfizer, and one of the, and this isn't music related, but it's marketing related. So one of the things that the CEO was discussing on the podcast was the way that Pfizer markets. And Pfizer will market on a lot of mainstream news platforms like CNN, MSNBC, and you have stories where an anchor is coming on the television or laptop, phone, wherever you're watching it, and they are allegedly giving you a piece of information. They're giving you a story that they are telling you to the best of their ability, supposed to be in an unbiased way. And a lot of the news in the past year and a half has been surrounding COVID, surrounding the vaccines. And I think the vaccines are a great thing. I'm vaccinated. You know, it's I have a lot of unexpert opinions about COVID, but in terms of marketing from a standpoint from Pfizer, and I'm not picking on them in particular because a lot of companies do this, but it made me feel kind of sad to see examples of a story that was newsworthy, and I thought, you know, was something that I could trust about a medical topic like the vaccine, and then right after cutting to commercial, it said brought to you by Pfizer. And I was like, like, okay, how much of what I just heard about the vaccine is true, and how much of what I just heard is because a company like Pfizer is cutting them $20 million checks, and which a lot of companies do. And that's a challenge with taking sponsors in podcasting, a challenge with taking sponsors in media, whatever you're doing, is that you would like your opinion to stay unbiased, and you would like your audience to trust you, even though other things are influencing you financially. So I would imagine there are similar situations in music. Like at a very small level, you talked about artists promoting granola bars that aren't really into granola bars. They're just like, fuck it, I'll throw this concert because this granola bar is sponsoring me. Are there things like that you see that could equate to the Pfizer example in the music industry, where you're like, I know I know this is not as honest as I thought it was, because this person is sponsored by X or Y company behind the scenes.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of those situations throughout the music industry. But I think the music industry overall is pretty, at least like from the conversations that I have with friends and that I have within, like, that I hear on marketing calls in the company and that we talk about, like, it's pretty like aware that art, like, people, I think people are hypersensitive of artists selling out these days. So you can't really do that. Like, and if you do that, like, you're setting up the artist for failure.
Yeah, that's the first insult that people have in their back pocket to launch at an artist. It's that, oh, you're a fucking sellout.
Yeah.
And it's like, dude, like I took $20 and they're like, dude, it doesn't fucking matter. You're a sellout, dude. I'm not listening to you anymore. And it's cliche, but you know, like you said, it's also true that music artists and people are worried about quote unquote selling out. But there's, to me, the definition of selling out is letting the money that you're getting influencing your creativity to reach a place that would not have come if the money wasn't there.
Yeah.
So I have no problem with artists taking money, and that is something that I do at a much smaller level than Pfizer. You know, if Pfizer wants to cut me a very big check for this podcast, you know, I'll fucking run that shit all day. But it's something that people think about as listeners of music, listeners of podcasts, consumers of content, how much of this is being influenced by sponsors behind the scenes, how much, like, all the backstory stuff, and sellouts is a big part of that. Like, people that take the money and then let it change them and take them to a place that they wouldn't have gotten to if the check wasn't there.
Yeah. And I mean, I think the idea of it changing them is a good way to identify, like, what selling out is a little bit. Yeah. But also, like, I agree with your point. Like, it's okay to get the bag. Like, that's why we're all, like, you have to get paid for your hard work, your art, your podcast, like, your career. And businesses have to make money and have a bottom line for their investors, for their employees. And it's okay to make money. But I think that something that really excites me is the idea of doing that while also finding your place in this world where you're equally giving back to it and making it a better place. Yeah. Which isn't always easy, but I think a lot of people are starting to agree with that, and I think that's exciting.
Oh yeah. No, I couldn't be more pro bag as a podcaster and a content creator. Something that I'm working towards myself is getting sponsors to the point and getting subscribers to the point where I can step away from my job and be financially dependent on podcasting only without another check. So 100% I'm in support of artists networking and doing what they can to get the bag. It's more my own thoughts that I struggle with when I imagine myself in a place where there are big checks being cut by companies that maybe I believe in, like maybe a supplement I believe in, or a clothing brand I believe in, whatever it is, an equipment company, something for podcasting. I may truly believe in that company and they are paying me and I'm returning the benefit to them in the form of advertising and talking about it. But there's always this thing in the back of your mind where you say, if I say this, will this company drop me? If I say this, that maybe goes against what this company's goals are, and because they're a corporation and I'm an independent creator and other people are independent creators, is there a line that I should not cross, and will that affect the way that I'm able to be sponsored or other people are able to be sponsored. Like I think there are lines and there are lines that I won't cross from a human standpoint and a philosophical standpoint, but I wouldn't want new lines to be introduced by sponsors, if that makes sense. Like
Right.
that's something that I think about for myself. I'm like, do I have the strength and the balls to say things and just let my sponsors trust the content and not shrink away from the money?
Right. And I guess that's a good, like, bringing it back to being genuine. Like, that's a good way to, like, evaluate, is this brand genuinely sponsoring me because they believe in me? And if they're going to try to stifle your voice or not let you say something or not let you cross the line that you want to cross, then that's where it's like, okay, the bag isn't worth it. And that's where selling out, if you're still continuing to take that check, even though it's not right for you, then you're selling out.
Yeah.
And I think companies like music companies have a responsibility to let their artists have their voice.
Yeah. That being said, this podcast is brought to you by Pfizer, Moderna, and that Chinese vaccine that no one knows what the name of it is. But it's something that I think about, something I haven't really had the amount of money from podcasting where it would really be an issue, but down the line, anyone that's successful as a creator will eventually have to make decisions like that. So I appreciate your insight. I've had a lot of conversations with music artists and people in the music industry, and that's how Auxoro started out. I would go backstage, do a podcast only, no video, because video can be sketchy backstage depending on the lighting and shit like that. And so it was just audio. And I remember one of the things that came up in probably the first 20 or 30 podcasts that I did at some point was playlist placement, and how Spotify and SoundCloud used to be this wild west for artists, and SoundCloud is still like that to an extent, but it seems like Spotify has become massively influenced by playlist selection, for better or worse. And I wanted to get your thoughts as someone who works in the music industry, what you think about playlist placement. Like, is it largely pay for play? Is there still room for independent artists to blow up organically? And how you've seen playlists develop from the perspective of someone who actually works with artists and works in the industry.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic, because people will say that now, with playlists and Spotify having so much power with their playlists, it's kind of just like the radio. Like, you're just trying to get on the best playlist, and it's not about how good the music is. It's about who you know who can get you on that playlist. But from my experience, those playlists and the people who curate them are music lovers, and they're doing everything in their power to, like, really listen to the music and put songs that they feel are meant to be on those playlists. Yes, relationships come into play. Like, it's good to know whoever's curating whatever playlist on Spotify, and that might help expedite you on there. But they're like, because I know people who do that, and they're genuinely listening with their opinion. That being said, not everybody's opinions are the same. So I think sometimes artists are like, why am I not getting on this playlist? But at the end of the day, it's just a real person deciding in that moment if you deserve to be on the playlist or not. And they, maybe a week later, if they were in a different headspace, you would have gotten on.
Yeah. I was thinking about it earlier today, how much trust I put into playlists for music. Podcasts, I'll still go to individual podcasters and go to episodes, but playlists, I would say 70% of my listening in music comes from going to an artist and picking a playlist that either has to do with that artist or going to a playlist that I've saved first. So I was thinking about the amount of people that create these playlists is not a lot. There's maybe one person that's creating a playlist on average, but then a team of people for something that's a Spotify pop playlist, something where millions of people are following. And there's a very small amount of people that control the listening habits, or not control, but influence to a significant degree the listening habits of millions and billions of people around the planet. And I don't know, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but it just hit me today when I was thinking about some things to talk about with music, that we put an immense amount of trust in people who play and people who consolidate these playlists, like working out, going on drives, walking down the street, like just flicking on a playlist and knowing that the next one is going to be it, and I trust this person, and there's going to be new music added every week and music taken away. And it is like the concept of trust with a playlist is pretty huge in a way that I really didn't realize until recently, and the amount of influence that playlists have on the music industry.
Yeah. And that definitely, and that's something that I've been feeling more and more lately, because I curate a playlist myself on Spotify.
That's right. What's it called? Another
little plug. It's called Hyper Pop Hits, and then there's a second one called Hyper Punk Hits, which is a little bit smaller.
Dope.
But Hyper Pop Hits just recently shot over 10K.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah. So now I'm thinking about it more, because I mean, it's always just been for fun and as a hobby. And now that it's over 10K, I'm like, okay, like I actually have some responsibility here. And fortunately, I do take it seriously. And every Sunday I have around like 40 to 50 submissions, and I sit down for 2 hours and I listen to every single submission. And I don't just listen to it for 10 seconds. I listen to it for a minute, or as long as it takes for me to really get a feel for it. But at the same time, there's like kind of what I was saying earlier, like depending on how I'm feeling in that moment, maybe that song is better than I think it is, or maybe it's worse than I think it is. So there's definitely some responsibility, but I hope that, and I do think that the majority of the people who are making these playlists love music and want the music to be heard. And even if, it's their music's just an opinion. It's subjective. So hopefully people like what they're putting on the playlist.
Yeah. So when you're picking songs for the playlist, you obviously have the theme of the playlist to go off of. Is there anything, when you're looking at a song, when you're listening to it for the first time, how do you listen to that song when you know it's eligible for going on one of your playlists, which has over 10,000 people? So you're not just listening to a song for fun. It's fun, obviously, but you're also trying to make a decision. What are some of the things that you look for when you're choosing that song? Like feeling, vibe, lyrics, melody, things like that.
So hyper pop in itself is a pretty unique genre. I'm not sure how much you've listened to it, but
how would you describe hyper pop?
It's overproduced, highly energetic, and fast-paced hyper pop music. But I mean, it's people. A lot of people don't even consider it a genre because it is so unique. And there's hyper pop that has hip hop influence. There's hyper pop that has punk pop influence. There's hyper pop that has more traditional pop influence.
So it's high energy across the board.
But yeah, generally it's high energy. So that's key, is it can't be like a low BPM song generally.
Who's an artist that is popular within the hyperpop genre, just so people have an idea?
So like Charlie XCX is one of the 4 leaders of it. Sophie, R.I.P. They were a very large artist, and 100 Gex is also kind of one of the ones who have popped off kind of on the earlier side of it. So those are like three of the biggest.
Yeah.
But right now, like Glaive is a huge hyperpop artist, or there's a lot. I got put onto it through Breakins, who is a really, he's even beyond hyperpop now, but also my friend Andy Polk, he's a really great hyperpop artist. So I could go on, but those are a few.
Fuck yeah. So when you're listening to a song for hyperpop, what are some of the things that go through your head and through your body and mind when you're making that ultimate decision of, do I throw this on or do I not? Do I let this sit?
For me, it goes back to,
because I'm trying to get on the playlist. That's why I have my secret project.
Hey man, send them my way. I'll hook you up. But I mean, it goes back to being genuine. Like, it's my playlist. I made it because I started liking hyperpop music and wanted to learn more about it. So if I like the song, then I put it on.
Yeah.
But also what I do, like, I generally lean towards more, like, hyperpop can get really crazy. Like, there's glitchcore and like ones that are just like noises and like wild. I generally don't love those, even though I know a lot of people do. So I generally stick with ones that kind of have more of a melody and are a little bit more pop sensical. Like,
it sounds more like noise than music almost.
Yeah. And there's some really cool ones that are pretty wild. But I like the ones that are more like, they have, even though they're always like very overproduced, a lot, like the really good ones in my opinion still have like a strong melody that is enjoyable.
Yeah. So I've listened to some of the artists that sound more like noise than music, and I will say that listening on headphones, it's not my favorite, but I have come across stages where someone is playing music that fits into what you're describing, where it's like a lot of sounds, glitchy noises, doesn't have an underlying melody, but I'm standing at the stage feeling the actual vibration, because anyone who's ever been to a music festival knows that the speakers are fucking gigantic. They're literally like skyscrapers.
Put your earplugs on.
Yeah, exactly. Even standing far away, I'm just like, holy shit. Like, I don't listen to this and think this is something that, like, it doesn't move me the same way an Adele song would.
Lyrics.
And it's not supposed to, because it's totally different, but the noise and the feeling of it definitely gets me going in person. Like, I've stood at stages for a long time and I've had thoughts run through my head where I'm like, I would be interested in talking to this artist to understand why they make music the way that they do, but it's not something I would go and select on a walk or go listen to before a party. But in person, there's a feeling to the vibrations running through you with noise and certain sounds that give you an energy that you want for a music festival.
Yeah. I mean, set and setting for, like, people say that in psychedelics.
It's like psychedelics.
Yeah, but in music, that's a thing too. Like, I've always said, I don't really love country music, but if I'm on the beach with a Corona and it's sunny out, throw on some country music and I'm happy. I agree with you that, like, a lot of the more heavy music is generally, like, I enjoy it more live because, like, you can really feel that energy and get into it. But then also, like, if it's in your headphones and you're in the gym and you're really like getting after it, then that's a good setting for that too. So
yeah. Also, cliches deter a lot of people from listening to certain kind of music, like country music, because the thing that people say about country music is, if you take a beer and a girl and a truck, you have every single country music song. But that's also not true.
No.
From the small amount of country music I listen to, I would say I've listened to hundreds of different country music songs, but there are people that have, listened to 10,000 plus country music songs that's their main form of listening. And I went to school down in Richmond, Virginia, where we had country artists coming in every single weekend. went to a bunch of country music concerts, and then I came back to New York and I would hear people diss country. And I got defensive, even though I listened to country music maybe like 5% of the time. I was like, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, have you ever drank a beer and listened to Luke Bryan in a lawn chair with like 80 other dudes with no shirt just drinking around you and getting fucked up, and the sun's coming down over the concert venue, and you're smoking a cig off 4 people that you don't even know, and you're sharing it anyway, and you know it's during Corona. It's like even more wild. There's that extra adrenaline rush of will I get sick or not, but it's like you have these preconceived notions about music, and some people may think, okay, I know what country music is because I've heard that cliche and never actually dive into it. And country music is some of the deepest, most moving music that I've listened to.
There's definitely some really beautiful country songs. There's also a lot of country songs that are about beer. And
There are. There's some moving country songs about beer, like the last glass of beer that I will ever drink.
You and Tequila, one of my favorite country songs, Kenny Chesney.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, there's a lot of beautiful country music, and cliche, as great as cliches are, because they're true, cliches can also be not good because they have people judging a book by its cover.
Yeah. So what would you say drew you to the music industry as your first job? Like, what, beyond being a fan of music, what made you want to get into the industry as a working professional?
So my sophomore year of college, I was a marketing major. So I studied all 4 years, and sophomore year, I didn't really know what I was doing with it. I just picked it because my best friend from home, Peter Mates, his grandma named Tutu, she's like the sweetest old Japanese lady. Like, we were in seniors in high school, and she was like, "You're going to be a successful businessman." And I was like, okay. So you said it.
Yeah, fuck yeah, Tutu.
You're right. I'm going to do that.
I'll cut your check.
Yeah. So I picked marketing. Didn't really know what I wanted to do with it. I was the social chair of my fraternity, kind of a classic story for a lot of people. But we were throwing events, and then my sophomore year, we booked Jeremy Zucker, who is a good friend of mine now. But at the time, somebody just sent me his songs, and we were like, this would be fun. And
what year is this? Sophomore year of college?
Yeah, this was 2016. So
so that was the early train, Jeremy Zucker.
Real early. Yeah. He had this song "Bout It" that was popping off on SoundCloud.
Yeah. How does it go? I feel like I
because
hear
I'm about it. If you're about it. You know, yeah, I know that so that actually, going back to marketing, we had an insane guerrilla marketing tactic for his show. I was a social chair, and we threw all the parties I
just remembered the melody. Could I say it?
Yeah, sing it.
I don't know you at all, but I'm bout it. If you bout it, that. And there's another one with Black Bear that I really liked a lot that he put out. I forget what it's called, but I listened to that song countless times.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I can't remember what it's called.
So you linked up with Jeremy Zucker back in 2016.
Yeah. So, we would, before he was coming, he was playing a day drink in our backyard, and for like a month leading up to it, we would play his song like 3 times at every social event we had. And it was college, so we had like 3 events a week. And by the time he came, we had 2,000 people in my backyard, and I'd say like 100 of them were singing like every single word to "Bout It." Not just because of us playing it, because it's also a great song, and it was popping off on SoundCloud, but people were loving it. So we did that, and I was like, wow, how much more fun was this event because there was live music. And I've always loved live music. My dad grew up taking me to concert. My dad and mom. My mom would kill me if I left her out, but we're
live streaming this to your parents right now.
Hey,
so
hey mom, hey dad. We went to a ton of concerts, and that kind of really grew my affinity for live music and for music in general. But also my grandfather, I have a bit of a history with my family because my grandfather owned a few nightclubs in Chicago back in the 60s and 70s.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, and I didn't really know much about it growing up because he passed away when my dad was 14 years old. So I never met him, but I heard some stories, and as I got older, I learned more and more.
So he must have had some mob ties if he owned a nightclub back in the 50s and 60s, like either having to pay them off in some way, or that's my basic understanding of how the mob works. You own a nightclub and they come in and they're like, you owe us $2,000 this month for letting you operate in our vicinity, and then you're like, here you go, and they're like, thanks, see you next month.
Yeah, so it's funny you say that, because he was actually extremely vocal about his non-affiliation with the mob throughout his business. Like,
oh shit!
I mean, of course,
so he was a target. You
can't own a business without like having respect from them. I don't really know how he maneuvered it, but he was very vocal about the fact that he was not like paying off the mob. And so my uncle actually recently, for the past like 10 years, has been working on this project where he released a documentary about my grandfather. And
really?
it was a business owned by my grandfather and his brother. It's called Mr. Kelly's.
Mr. Kelly's.
Yeah.
Can people stream it right now?
Yeah, you can stream it on Amazon. It's called Live at Mr. Kelly's.
Live at Mr. Kelly's. I'm gonna check it out.
It's really fascinating history. He had people like Aretha Franklin, Barbara Streisand, Bill Cosby. I know we don't love Bill Cosby anymore.
Oh yeah, but back in the what was this? You said 50s and 60s he started. So Bill Cosby was like he was a young comedian, and no one knew what he was. He had eyes on him, and I assume if you could book him as a nightclub, that was like, fuck yeah, like we're gonna get people coming out tonight.
Yeah, they booked the best of the best of talent. They would fly to New York, and they created a stage in Chicago for artists who normally wouldn't have that stage. And specifically, their nightclubs, Mr. Kelly's was one of the only nightclubs that black performers could have a stage at back then. Black performers, women, who didn't have that stage back then, and Mr. Kelly's allowed for that. So that was something that they always really championed. And that's kind of what has driven my passion for social impact and merging it with music, because seeing how successful and how impactful that platform was back then is something that like has really inspired me, and I want to continue that legacy.
Yeah, you have social events and partying for good built into your bloodstream.
Exactly.
That's something in your gene pool, and something that I've experienced as a friend and a fellow partier at Benny Presents events of the wild nights that you curate, and then also having a portion of the proceeds go to a good cause. And so it's really cool to hear about your uncle who was curating events back in the day.
Grandfather.
Uncle
made the documentary.
Okay, Uncle made the documentary. Yeah. Grandfather was the nightclub host back in Chicago. It's cool to hear about your grandfather making those events happen, bringing people together back in the day, and then also making it a place that black performers could come and women could come and perform when they weren't able to get stage time at most other places. That's really cool.
It's important because art is meant to be shared with everybody. So, and that my dad always, I didn't know much about my grandpa growing up, but my dad always said that whether it was the performers or whether it was his employees, he instilled it in my dad and in his entire business that you treat everybody with respect, no matter who they are.
Yeah. That's probably a big reason why he was able to operate outside of the mob and then also survive, is that the mob had his respect in some way, and he gave respect for the mob. Even if he didn't agree with what they were doing, he might have, I have no idea, but if I'm running a business like that and there's an entity that could come in and crush you whenever they wanted, they could come in and make life hell for you, you don't have to agree with what they're telling you to do. You don't have to give in to what they're telling you to do, but you should at least be somewhat likable and have a mutual likability, because it's for your own benefit and for their benefit too. And then try to understand where that group is coming from, even if it's doing illegal shit and it's doing a lot of harm to people. There's a way that they operate, and there's a way that your grandfather was able to operate and make that work and keep curating experiences for people.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think that the respect that I don't know how he did it. You're right. Like, it must have been tough because it's the mob, but showing respect and I guess being like a mediator of like, you don't have to agree with everybody, but you can still understand them. And I think that's a good lesson in life in general. Like, I try, it's hard to like have your opinions and disagree with people while also agreeing with all, like, it's hard to like stay true to yourself when you disagree with people, but it's important to appreciate other people's viewpoints.
Yeah, that's one of the benefits of in-person partying, and something that I've experienced when I go out in New York and other cities when I've gone to your events is when I lead with understanding when I'm meeting new people, and I'm meeting men and women, guys and gals that I may agree or disagree with, but the conversation is interesting and I want to keep the conversation going. And if I'm presented with an opinion that I don't agree with and I get defensive right away, that cuts off the conversation because it puts the other person in a mode of defensiveness as well. But if someone says something that I don't agree with and I attempt to understand why they think the way that they think, and I'm just like, like, you believe this, and I grew up 28 years now thinking something complete opposite, like, I'm curious about that. I'm not going to tell you you're wrong right away because I want to listen to why you think that. And then maybe by the end of the night, I think differently. Or a month later, I think differently. I think about it 2 years later. Or maybe I don't change my opinion at all. Maybe it was a good time. You have a conversation and you part ways. And I think that's one of the most unspoken benefits of partying and having a good time in a social environment is if you can turn off your defensiveness meter for 3 hours and just have a steady buzz and enjoy people for who they are without judgment, that will make your night a 15 out of 10 instead of a 6 out of 10 if you get into that butthurt mode right away when someone disagrees with you or someone says something and you immediately go to, you're a piece of shit human being, like this, like that, and like you haven't even let the person explain why it is what they believe, how they grew up, and things that they went through, shit like that. Like, it's a deep way to look at partying, but now that I'm thinking about it, like, that is a big part of partying. It's just hearing people tell stories and then understanding where they came from.
No, I think you hit it on the head, and that's like, really, if I had to, I guess, give like one sentence of why I love partying and why I love live music and why I love hosting parties, is because it puts people in a room together who normally would never be in a room together in some situations, but it breaks down their barriers, and they're all there for one reason: to have a good time, to hear good music. And it sounds like you're having some pretty philosophical questions or conversations at these parties, but
sometimes, yeah. I mean, I do enjoy getting into deep conversations. Obviously, we're doing this right now, and it's fun as fuck, and I enjoy it. And I wouldn't go this deep or this long at a party, but there is it doesn't necessarily have to be a philosophical conversation for something to be deep.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is, for example, if I'm smoking a cigarette outside and I and you ask me for a cigarette and I give one to you and you bum a cigarette and you say something, you say, oh yeah, like I don't really smoke anymore, you know, just when I'm fucked up and I like to have a cigarette. And then you talk back and forth and then all of a sudden you get into why I started smoking. I'm the one who gave you the cigarette. And maybe I tell a story about my girlfriend breaking up with me sophomore year and I was looking for a fix and I just started fucking numbing myself with cigarettes every single day and going out and drinking and smoking cigarettes was a part of it. You just had maybe a 15-20 minute conversation with another person about the reason why they left someone or the reason one of the reasons how they got over a breakup through the act of asking, oh, like, yeah, how'd you, like, what made you want to start smoking? And you're at a party fucked up and it's not really a deep thing, but it becomes, it's like a very narrow entrance to cigarette smoking, but you dug a mile deep into that topic. Now, and the opposite would be if you start with relationships, which is super fucking deep, it's a mile wide, and maybe you only scratch the surface with that because the person isn't that open to it, or, you know, they just don't feel like talking about it. But I've found that, at least for me, and this applies to podcasts too, the best way to get deep with people is to narrow your focus and just become insanely curious about a tiny part of their behavior or one decision they've made. And then if you are actually curious, that will open the door to things that you would have never expected.
Yeah. And who knows where that conversation could go. It could lead to a new business partner. It could lead to a new idea. It could lead to somebody changing maybe their certain political views. That would be hopeful for some at a party. But I love it. I mean, I love it because like at my parties, you'll show, or our parties, I should say, because it's we all do it together. But you find people who grew up in Greenwich, Connecticut, who I met in college, who are there, or you find people who grew up down in Alabama, or who are just from New York and have entirely different family background than some of the other people at the party. And it really brings together people from all over. So I think that if we all just kind of viewed life as just one big party and didn't have as many barriers, then we probably would be in a lot better place right now.
Yeah. So you mentioned Jeremy Zucker, and I wanted to ask you about him because I'm a big fan of Jeremy Zucker. He's insanely talented. I enjoy his music a lot, and you got a chance to see him live and actually book him in the early budding stage of his music career back in 2015, 2016. And looking at how far he's come now, where he's selling out theaters, going on international tours, you know, he's at 10, 15 million streams per month on Spotify, whatever it is when I last looked at it. Did you see anything early on, 7, 8 years ago, where you honed into, okay, Jeremy Zucker, this dude's gonna be a fucking smash? Something about him singing live, the way he carried himself, something that gave you an insight into who he was gonna become?
I mean, it always goes back to the music, because if the music isn't incredible, then
oh yeah, no doubt,
it's pretty tough. Obviously, there's some people who slide in there, but the music is incredible. Like, great producer, great singer. Back in the Bout It days, he was doing more like hip hop even, but that's developed into so much more now. But I think outside of the music, it's the way he carries himself. He's a great guy. He's extremely charismatic, and he, at a time when social media is super important, he knows how to interact with people. And I think he's a great example of one of those artists who's just extremely genuine. He speaks his mind on his social platform. He engages with his fans, and since I've known him, he always seemed to do that really well in a way that it wasn't like he was promoting himself on Instagram. Like he just is a normal human being, and I think he does that really well.
Yeah. I know he's a meaningful artist to me because he is one of those artists that when I'm on a drive, a 2, 3, 6 hour drive, I will just click his name and shuffle it. And there's not a ton of artists that I will do that for just 2 hours straight. Yeah. And the bad part about that is that you don't get a lot of names of the songs because you're just like, you just have it on playing, and like a lot of it mixes together into one experience. But he's an artist that I trust to just take me to wherever I'm going. I'm just like, Jeremy Zucker, shuffle, whatever comes up. I know I'm going to enjoy it on this drive. And that, like, to me, I couldn't put in words what it is about him and about his music. Obviously the music is great, but there's something about artists that you're willing to do that with, that there's just this element of, their songs are different, and some are harder, some are softer, in between, but there's something about the vibe that you're just in for, no matter what it is or what the melody is, what the lyrics are. You're just like, if a Jeremy Zucker song comes up, I know it's not going to be a bad experience. I know I'm going to vibe out on this drive. And like Kid Cudi is like that for me. I mentioned Black Bear is like that for me. Like Rufus Du Sol is like that for me. Ooh. And I would actually put Jeremy Zucker in that group where I've definitely just pressed play and have driven to him on multiple trips and have been quite pleased. Sounds very sexual. Zucker pleased me so on the drive. But it was awesome. I mean, it was he makes dope music, and I'm trying to think of a way to verbalize how I could show the meaning, like what it means to me. And if I was going to put it into words, it'd just be like, I just shuffle him when I drive, and I trust it.
I mean, it's a hard thing to vocalize when an artist impacts you in that way, and you enjoy their music in that way. But I mean, you listed him off with some other great artists who make incredible music, and there's a lot of other artists who hit other people in that same way, and who also make incredible music. I think a lot of different factors go into it, like the time and period of your life. Are they singing about things that really kind of hit close to home for you, and you're interpreting in a way that like applies to your day-to-day life? Like Kid Cudi is somebody like that for me. And back in high school, like I was really formative years, growing into myself, and a lot of his music is about those things. I was also starting to smoke weed for the first time, and like that was
Kid Cudi smokes weed?
Oh no, never.
I thought, but yeah, that's a good point. So Kid Cudi is a drive and shuffle artist for you?
Oh yeah,
for sure,
easily.
For me too, definitely. He's definitely get that dose of dopeness from Kid Cudi, and
have you seen the documentary he put out?
Is it A Man Named Scott on Apple?
Scott,
yes.
I thought that was incredible. And like the people who he got to, who are also like our age, who are huge musicians now, like Schoolboy Q.
Yeah, fanboying over Kid Cudi, saying how important this guy is.
Travis Scott fanboying over Kid Cudi, like so cool.
It's cool. It's cool to see him talk about the music and watch clips of him early on trusting his musicality and trusting his gut as an artist. When you see him in the studio and he's fucking 20 years old, just humming into the microphone over a melody, like who the fuck was doing that? And Kid Cudi was doing it, and he's so fucking good at it, and his lyrics are out of control too. And I'll never forget when Man on the Moon came out when I was in high school. I think it was 2011, and that album, I know it sounds cliche, like that album changed my life, but that album changed the way that I experienced other albums, because nowadays there are a lot of albums that come out that are basically like fucking ejaculation blasts across the wall, hoping that 2 tracks are gonna hit and it's gonna blow up. And it's like you put out 25 tracks that aren't, maybe half of them you thought were good, half of them weren't, and it's just kind of this splatter and it doesn't tell a story. But listening to Man on the Moon from start to finish upped my expectations of the album listening experience. And yeah, like hearing him for the first time in high school, I was like, whoa, this is music. Like, this is insane. Like, I feel like I'm having an experience more than I'm listening to music.
Oh, definitely drives experiences, that album. But then he followed it up with Man on the Moon 2, which is like, I'd argue, I mean, a lot of people would disagree with this, but Man on the Moon 2 is actually the more formative one for me. Like, I fell in love with the journey of Mr. Rager. I was like, I want to be on this journey. And then he made a documentary about the making of that album, and I watched that thing like over and over again. And yeah, he's just like, he's a charismatic guy. I mean, you'll find in the newer documentary that he was actually going through a lot of trauma during that time period and issues with mental health and stuff. But he, at the time, I thought he was the man. Like,
yeah, something that I remembered. I can't remember if this is from the documentary directly, A Man Named Scott, or this was a podcast he was on. But I remember he was talking about meeting fans early on when he was first becoming famous, and he would wake up and do Lines of Blow and then drink a beer and smoke weed so that the people that were around him wouldn't suspect that he was doing cocaine daily or however often he was meeting fans. But he said it was helpful to him to meet fans when he was being famous and when he was first becoming famous. And I don't remember his exact words, and I hope I'm not misrepresenting this, but he was talking about the drugs he was doing and short term in the moment being something that was a boost to allow him to interact with fans at that stage in his career in a way that he might not have been able to otherwise. Like the coke, the weed, the booze, the combination of that gave him the confidence to walk around in a city and have people come up to him and have genuine conversation with fans. And there's not a lot of people that are willing to go out on a limb and even mention that a drug could be a positive experience. Like, it's always, don't do drugs, sign this thing when you're in 8th grade pledging that you're never going to drink, you're never going to smoke weed, like seal it. And then 2 years later, you're having your first beer. But I think that moment in particular stood out to me because he was talking about drugs. And he did mention the repercussions that they had. And obviously, he took a step back from a lot of his drug use. But he spoke about it in a way that I could relate to, because people do drugs because they like it and because it's fun at the start. And there is something good to it, or else people wouldn't do it. They wouldn't keep doing it. There's something they're getting out of it. And he was talking about that. And to me, when I first heard that, I was like, oh, fuck, like that's an example of true authenticity. He's willing to say that, yeah, what I was doing was not good for me long term, and I eventually took a step back. But at that moment in my life, that was positive. Like, I got something out of it. It wasn't all negative. There was something to it that was allowing me to grow in some way.
Yeah, and that's why we love him, right? Because he's authentic and vulnerable, and that's why musicians we owe a lot to musicians, because it takes a lot of courage to be that vulnerable. I mean, even just putting posts on Instagram or jumping on a podcast, like it's not an easy thing to do.
It's easy to do from a technical standpoint, but it's and something I struggle with too. It can be tough to be authentic in the moment on a podcast and have a conversation and be yourself and share that unapologetically when the light comes on. Like, I'm literally looking at the red light right now and I know we're recording, and I've done 200 plus of these, so it doesn't faze me in the same way it did when I did my first or my second one backstage. But yeah, like any artist, anyone who gets behind a mic and puts something out there, even if it's an Instagram post, it takes some type of courage to put yourself out there authentically. If it's an authentic post and you're doing it because it's something that's true to you, that does take a baseline level of, I'm going to put this shit out there. Because there are a lot of people who have talents and they're incredibly talented and they're creating in silence and the world never sees what they do. And often the first step is putting a video out on Instagram or just throwing something up on SoundCloud. And for every person that throws something out there, there's 100 or 1,000 other people that fuck around and they never get to that first post. They never share it with the world. And sometimes it's because they don't want to, and it's just a hobby and that's good enough for them. But sometimes it comes out of fear, and the world has one less artist. And I'm glad Kid Cudi took that step, because it's he's fucking insane. He's a dope artist.
Yeah, I'd agree with that 100%.
So I wanted to get into TikTok a little bit.
Okay.
Because TikTok transformed the music industry like night and day. Before TikTok, after TikTok. At least I'm looking at the music industry and music in general outside. I don't work in the music industry. I've had conversations with people who work in the music industry, obviously music artists, but TikTok seems to have taken music by storm, and it's given a lane for artists to bypass a lot of the hierarchy in the music industry, and a lot of like even playlisting in a sense, or things that you normally have to like get here and here and here. It seems like someone blows up on TikTok and then 2 weeks later they sign a record deal, or they have a song on Spotify that's done like 10 million streams and shit goes fucking wild. So I wanted to ask you what your thoughts on TikTok are and how it's affected the music industry.
I mean, I'm going to be entirely honest. Like, I'm not an expert on TikTok, and I don't understand it in a lot of ways. Like I said, I had it deleted off my phone for about a year and a half. So I'm by no means an expert, but I have seen firsthand friends who are experts and who have been doing really well on it, and who have discovered really great artists on it. Like my friend Danny Rackow discovered one of his artists, Peter McPoland, on there, and I think that one of the amazing things about Peter is that he comes from like a drama background, and he's extremely like, he's built perfectly for TikTok, and I think there's like maybe two like types of artists who you find, like he's got great music, but he also is perfect for video format, because like he does these videos where you can tell that he's like, I mean, he's being himself, but he's like playing this character that goes along with his songs, that it's just really enjoyable to watch.
Yeah.
But then there's also like songs that are created with hooks that just are perfect for TikTok. And or production that's perfect for TikTok, and that has like those drops in it, or those lyrics in it that allow for like that quick transition that works really well on TikTok. So I guess those are like two components that are definitely like something that you wouldn't have been able to really identify as blowing up an artist prior to TikTok.
I'm in a similar boat as you, because I deleted TikTok as well. I just felt myself getting too sucked into it, but I do see the progression of music artists, and I've followed music artists that I saw initially on TikTok and have now exploded. And something interesting that I see on TikTok that I don't know if you had the ability to do this on other social media platforms or do it to this due to this extent. So I'll see artists throw out partial songs, 30 seconds, 60 seconds, and then once it's out in the ethosphere, people react to it, people share it, people comment, and they'll say like, oh, well, like, I fucking love this hook or whatever, or I don't like this, or do this, do that. And then if one does really well above all the others, that will be the next release. And I've seen artists, it's been interesting to watch, take that pattern, because I haven't really seen that before TikTok. I never saw artists putting out partial songs and almost making it, I don't want to say a popularity contest, because it's not purely just a vote from likes and comments. I'm sure some artists might just go with whichever song gets the most likes, that's the one I'll make into a full song. But you're getting the opinion of people on a song before it comes out. Like if Kid Cudi put out the hook of Soundtrack to My Life before he released Soundtrack to My Life, because people are like, oh fuck, like that's insane. I think that's really interesting to watch, the way that artists have been creative with testing their music on TikTok in a way that they weren't able to before.
I think it's really interesting because, of course, TikTok has allowed artists to do it to a much, much larger scale, but artists have done that through growing up, going to a concert, like an artist plays an unreleased track that they can really gauge the audience's feedback from in that live setting. Or like a specific memory is when I was growing up, Chance the Rapper was on Jimmy Fallon and he played an unreleased track called Angels. And I heard it and I fell in love with it just from Jimmy Fallon, so much that I did the whole YouTube URL thing and I like downloaded the audio from it, and I was listening to Angels for like a year or 2 years before it came out. And by the time it came out, I was like so excited and I knew every single word. So I think artists have always, like, that's always been to a certain extent, but now that maybe I've never even really thought about it this way until now, but maybe that's why it works so well on TikTok, is because like it's something that it works.
Yeah, that's a good point. Artists have been doing it. TikTok is just a massive instant feedback. Even if you play a song at Madison Square Garden, you have 25, 30,000 people giving you feedback, which is a shit ton. But to be able to put your song out on TikTok, have the first 30 seconds out there, and then, you know, maybe that does 2 million streams and the rest of your clips on TikTok have gotten like 50K. You're like, oh shit, I don't know what this is. I don't know if I'll make this into a song, but something about this clip is resonating with people. Something about this clip is hitting people in a way that they're really feeling.
Yeah, it's definitely like immediate. You get to see the comments and the likes right away.
Yeah.
And artists are doing it. I think it's interesting because some artists are doing it for songs that they really just created and they're just throwing it out there.
Yeah.
But back to the genuine side, now artists are also doing it with songs that they know they're intending to release, because you have to submit your music like 3 weeks before it hits DSPs, and then they're quote unquote teasing it, but they know it's going to be out. But I mean, that's a strategy, and it works. So
yeah. So I actually talked about this with Gavin, and I'm curious to get your opinion on it. So Lil Nas X, one of the artists that went through the roof on TikTok, and that translated to Spotify in the form of streams, where he has 50 plus million streams per month. And I've heard people on podcasts that are within the music industry or have knowledge of the music industry say that yes, Lil Nas X is getting streams, but he may be having trouble getting 4,000 to 5,000 tickets for a headlining show. So like he's popping off online, but people simply aren't just buying tickets. And that may or may not be true, by the way. Like that's just hearsay from music industry podcasts. And then that made me think about artists like Rufus Du Sol or Odessa that have 10 times less streams than an artist like Lil Nas X. So maybe 4 or 5 million streams a month, but they're selling out Red Rocks 3 nights in a row. Like they put out a show, and out of those 5 million fans, like a huge percentage is showing up. That Rufus and Odessa, they have their hooks absolutely synced in to their fans, where there's a connection that is beyond just the streams, and it came up on a playlist or something like that. So I wanted to ask you, like, is there something to be said about the overvalue of attention in terms of the number of streams and the undervalue of individual connections between the artist and a fan? So essentially, maybe you have 50 million tentacles reaching out from your music, and they're all touching people that are streaming it on the surface. If you visualize that, there's 50 million tentacles extending from you, and it's touching people's hands and feet, but it's not really tied to them. Or you have 500,000 tentacles extending from you as an artist, but they're like deep into the skin of your fans. They're like wrapped around your fans, and like where you go, your fans go. And if you move in one direction, like 5 million of those tentacles like will just slide off of one artist. But then when the other artist moves, like even though he only has 500,000 tentacles, like that fan is being pulled with it. Like they feel more of a connection. They feel more called to that artist. And sometimes I feel like TikTok it's driving baseless attention in a way that artists may be overvaluing. And that's not really a question. That's just something I was thinking about. It's hearing the hearsay about Lil Nas X, and then my own experience going to concerts with guys like Odessa, that I see the streams. It's not absurd, but they sell out shows like in a fucking second whenever they announce it.
Yeah. I mean, the mindless listening behavior that you're kind of describing that Spotify allows for is called passive listening. And I think that if there's one thing that I don't like about Spotify and other streaming platforms, as much as I love playlists and how accessible all of this amazing music is that I am a much more passive listener now than I would be otherwise. I hear songs that I love, and I forget the names of the artists. I forget the names of the songs. I don't know what the album artwork looks like necessarily. And I think that it's a struggle that a lot of artists are having is they're finding creative ways to grab those passive listeners, and it's driving streams. But I think a lot of artists, at the end of the day, they're trying, and I'd hope that a lot of artists, they're trying to build real, genuine connection with their fans, like some of the more traditional artists have done through really grinding it out in the live music scene, or really getting out there at the merch booth and selling merch after your show. So you got to do both of them, and you got to do. It's great that you can grab those passive listeners, but then you got to figure out a way to convert them. And if you can't convert them, then I guess your music is gonna get lost, because there's so much music being released every single week.
Who's the last artist that you listened to in a non-passive way? You weren't driving, you weren't doing something else, but you were like in the moment, present, listening to that song or that album through and through, just for that artist specifically.
That's a cool question. Honestly, it's Oliver Tree. As funny as that is,
Oliver Tree.
Yeah, Oliver Tree, and that's funny because he's actually like popping off on TikTok right now in his career. he's been like doing well for years now, but his career is like really popping off now that he's got a couple songs going off on TikTok. But he just put out an album this past Friday, and I listened to it straight through. And I think I make a conscious effort. I'm not your average listener, right? Like I work in the music industry. I'm really passionate about a lot of these artists. So I made it like every week, if there's an album that's out about an artist who I care about or who I'm interested in, like I'll make it. I listen to like two albums or EPs maybe like a week, like 2 full projects a week, because I think that's a really important way to digest music.
So Oliver Tree, that's an example of an artist you found on TikTok that you have a genuine connection with now. Like you presently listen to his music.
No, I was more just saying it's funny that I'm using him as an example because he probably has a ton of passive listeners. I found him because I have been listening to him for a while. He's also under the label I work for. And he also, I saw him at Firefly this past summer, and it was an incredible show. So lots of different factors, but
so yeah, I guess that's the goal. You would never want to push away passive listeners. Of course, even for a podcast, if you have 10,000 listeners to an episode and 3,000 of those are just people that are listening to it on the drive or doing laundry or something like that, just because it was recommended to them, hell yeah, I'll take that. And then you also want those listeners that are going to follow you and allow you to take risks, even if it's in a different direction than what the passive listeners are used to. I guess that would be the benefit of having a huge active listener base, is that you have more freedom to take risks with your music and with what you say, and know that your artist will trust you in a way that you may not get if you take a deviation from what you've been doing, from what got you all of those listeners.
Yeah, it's loyal fans.
Yeah.
I mean, the end goal is super fans, because then they'll be your ride or dies no matter what.
I feel like MGK is a good example of that, Machine Gun Kelly, because he grew up straight rapper from Cleveland, really didn't started dabbling a little bit in alternative punk at times, but for the better part of a decade was putting out straight rap, and I'm a huge fan of Machine Gun Kelly's rap. And then he started performing pop punk, and I thought it was really fucking good. I'm a big fan of his latest releases and his work with Travis Barker. And he obviously had a huge active listener base because he went from rap to pop punk, which now these days there's a lot of crossover. Yeah. But for him to do that and retain the fans that he had from his rapping days, Wild Boy days, Hotel Diablo, he probably had some fans leave, but he also had a large chunk of them that stayed and said, like, all right, I trust Machine Gun Kelly. I've built a relationship listening to this artist. I feel a certain way about him, and I'm willing to give this album a stream. And it's worked out for him really well. There are other artists that may not be able to make the transition that he did into pop punk and retain the same number of listeners and be able to sell out shows in the same fashion. Because it is a huge it's like if like Jack Harlow put out a pop punk album next year, like he's really fucking big, obviously. But the question is, how many of his fans would he retain that loved him for his rap? And that is something valuable to me, like being able to take creative risks and knowing that you have that bond with your fans.
That's a good artist example of the importance of super fans, because I loved MGK when he was a rapper, but then I went and saw him at Lollapalooza in like 2017 or something, right when he was testing out the pop punk alternative stuff. I walked up to the show. I knew his like major hit rap songs, and then he's up there with like a guitar doing pop punk. And I remember I like was in the back of the crowd. I was like screw this, like this, what is he doing? And then now when the timing's so important too, because at that time there was no pop punk resurgence, and now that's like really happening, and he stuck with it. And not only did he stick with it, but his fans stuck with, those core fans that you're talking about stuck with him.
Yeah.
So that even the fans like me who maybe would jump off the bandwagon didn't matter so much, because he had the real fans, to the point where now I'm back on the bandwagon because I love the newer stuff.
Yeah, like it's to you, it was such a shock from what you were used to listening from him that it was an initial rejection, and then you came back at a later punk. At a later punk. Yeah, that's the next album title. A later punk, postmodern punk. But yeah, it was an initial rejection, and then you, for whatever reason, decided to come back to him, and that, like, I wouldn't describe myself as a super fan of Machine Gun Kelly, but I'm somewhere in between of just an average fan and a super fan, where I didn't feel rejected by the pop punk, but I also didn't get it at first. I was still listening to it, but I was like, where is this going? Like, is this a one-off song? Like, is this going to be a couple albums? Is this him forever? Is this not? And then during quarantine, he was putting out a variety of combinations with rap covers and alternative covers. He was doing covers with Youngblood, and then he was also rapping over Shawn Mendes instrumentals, tweaking them. And I was like, oh, like, he's actually really passionate about the punk atmosphere and the pop punk atmosphere. He's hanging out with Travis Barker. He's playing guitar. He's singing. He's getting better at singing. And that, to me, was an example of having that connection where you're willing, like, it's not just the music, and TikTok is a huge part of that, where you can see the behind the scenes of artists making these creative videos and then putting them out, and then going to listen to the music and have that connection.
Yeah, and he crushed it during the pandemic with those videos. Like,
oh yeah,
and that's another thing, is he's been grinding for a long time, and like, you can tell he wants it, and he wants nothing. There's nothing else for him. He was having
covers with 100 million streams just on YouTube. The Smoke and Drive cover with Mike Posner.
Yeah,
like, there were a lot of artists that took a step back from making music during the quarantine, and you do what you have to do if you're going through something, which everyone was collectively to different extents. But if you're in a place where you feel like you can't put out music, then that's okay. You do what you do for you. There were also artists that maybe were up to making music, but just kind of packed it in for the pandemic, thinking like, oh, the world's not moving, so I don't have to move. My fans will be there when this shit ends in 2 months, and it ended up being 2 years. And Machine Gun Kelly was one of the artists who was constantly putting out something, every week or multiple times a week, whether it was a cover or a new song or both. And I really appreciated it, looking back on the pandemic, looking back on like 2020, 2021. He was someone who was consistently just trying to do shit.
Mm-hmm. And doing it well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've thrown a lot of insane parties in NYC.
We've had a couple good ones. Yeah.
You have legendary parties in NYC, and you raise money for very good causes. And I've been to 4 or 5 of these gatherings at Mi Casa and the disco night, and you have the upcoming party. Can you plug that real quick, and I'll link this in the description as well.
Sweet. Yeah. March 19th. I've been doing consistent parties at the Sultan Room, which is in Bushwick. It's an incredible venue, a lot of fun, great lights, great sound system. There's a stage you can dance on. We all love dancing on stages. Yeah. And yeah, it's on March 19th. I'm flying in Johnny Sum. He's an incredible funky house techno DJ who I became friends with in New York. He's living out in LA now, but he's flying back for it. Always puts on a great set. He booked the other two artists, Honey Bun. She's incredible. Same vibe DJ, but she's got some like really cool worldly mixes on SoundCloud. So if you peep those, you'll get a good vibe for the evening. And yeah, this one is going to be a lot of fun. So definitely come out for it.
As someone who has thrown a lot of parties, what separates the good parties from the great ones? What's the shit, even as an experiencer of parties of which you haven't thrown, what are the things that combine into the experience of a party, whether it's music, people, drinks, both, like vibe, theme? What are the elements to you that you can't not have if you want to throw a great party?
The people is number one, and I think that's something that's unique to all great parties, is they curate an event that brings the right people together. And what I love about the parties that we do is that you'll show up and you'll see your friend who you grew up with just randomly there. You didn't even know they were going to be there, but then you'll also see your friend from college, and then you'll see a couple of your coworkers, and then you might meet somebody else in the same industry as you, and you'll make a networking connection. I have a strong track list of some friends who have met their girlfriends at these events, and I love to say that they always play Cupid. So who needs the dating apps? Just come out to a Benny Presents event.
Yeah, Benny Presents is the new Hinge.
Yeah, so I think the people is really important. Next up, definitely the music, and creating a safe space where people can be themselves and not feel. I think part of the reason why I'm passionate about these events too is because when I first moved to New York City, we were going out to some of the same clubs in Manhattan where you walk in and there's like this pretentious energy of like, you can't dance, because I think our generation, like if you look back at past generations, they're dancing with everybody at the party. They're like, men and women know how to like actually dance together.
What do you think that is because is it an attitude change? Is it less phones? People are worried about having pictures taken of them. Like what do you think is responsible for the vibe switch with less people willing to dance spontaneously?
I mean, it's got to be phones and social media. Like people are so hypersensitive of how they're portrayed or what videos are going to be taken or how, like, yeah. And I mean, that's the only thing that I can truly think of that would lead to it. But like, yeah, I've just been to so many parties where like even I feel uncomfortable dancing, and you just look around and you're like, why are we all here if we're not going to be enjoying our time together? So I think creating a safe space it leads off of the people who are there, but making sure that the people who are there are able to have that.
There's this saying that goes, the world is full of billions of lonely people waiting to make the first move. And I think something similar could apply to dancing, where the world is full of a bunch of people. The world is full of a bunch of lonely people or a bunch of nervous people waiting to do the first dance or waiting to make the first move on the dance floor. Like I've been guilty of this as well. I've been to weddings, been to nights out at clubs, even going out in college. There are people drinking in groups, and they're congregated in a way where everyone's walking naturally, but then when the dance floor hits, people go apart and they walk around, especially when it's empty. It's like you just sense where the dance floor is and like you walk towards it, even if you're blindfolded and you're like, oh shit, like that feels like the dance floor. I'm gonna walk to my right now or walk to my left or go to the bathroom. And whoever the first person is to break the vanilla ice on the dance floor has an insane amount of courage to just go out there in the emptiness and the void and do a combination of moves that may or may not be rejected by everyone else there. And a lot of times that starts a chain reaction. And it's not necessarily the skill of the move. A lot of times it's just someone just like fucking, rocking back and forth. Maybe a guy and a girl go out there, and then all of a sudden people are like, oh, like, why am I standing here drinking this vodka soda?
Look at how much
why
fun
don't
they're having.
Why don't I chug this vodka soda and then move my body and put it down so I can use all four of my limbs? It's like everyone's waiting for the first person to go out there, but no one wants to be the first person, which is a good analogy for many things in life.
That it definitely is. And it's going back to what makes a good party is you need one of those first people or a couple of those first people in your network, or not in your network, but like at the party who are like, I pride ourselves in these events that it's always a good group of people who like to dance. And myself, even, like, I post before the parties on Instagram and I say, don't text or call me for me to come get you at the door if you can't get in or something.
Yeah.
Find me on the dance floor, because I want to be on the dance floor too, because the vibe that I'm giving off is gonna
that's a great motto in life. Find me on the dance floor, son.
Yeah.
And instead of airplane mode, it's dance floor mode, where you get a text back and it just says Ben Marienthal's on the dance floor right now.
Find me on the dance floor.
Yeah. Let's take a quick break and we'll hop back into it, because I gotta pee.
Me too.
Pee,
cool.
Pee. This is a general newsworthy topic that has taken the world by storm when it happened, and the aftermath is still occurring in the form of lawsuits. So the disaster at Astroworld Festival with Travis Scott happened. This was last November, so November 2021. Most people, you've probably seen the videos by now where there are it was like 50,000 people, something like that, at the Astroworld Festival with Travis Scott playing, and you can see that people are yelling for help, and there are ambulances in the crowd, and there's what appears as Travis Scott playing through obvious debauching in the audience. There's a lot of things going on in the audience where it seems like that would have warranted a stop in the show, and 10 people tragically lost their life at the Astroworld Festival, and there are now this came out on January 31st that there are now 400 lawsuits combined into one lawsuit that are suing Travis Scott and Live Nation for $3 billion in damages.
Jeez.
And I love Travis Scott's music, and I, as an observer of the performance, I wasn't there. I've only seen videos that people have posted on YouTube and Instagram. I will never have the experience that Travis Scott and his team had in the venue of putting on the performance and feeling what it was like and how much the danger is actually being communicated, that people were at the very least uncomfortable and at the very most losing their lives and literally suffocating to death. And this is the first. It seems like there were a lot of evidence that was pointing to the conclusion that the show should have stopped at some point, with ambulance literally driving through the crowd, with people rushing the stage to camera guys and saying like, stop the show. And this is the first time that I've seriously had to take a step back and think about what people say with separating the art from the artist. Like, if an artist does something that people perceive as bad, listeners of that artist may also feel bad, and you don't have to, but you may listen to their music in a different light and even question it. And some people may even stop listening to an artist's music depending on what they do. And I like I said, I love Travis Scott's music. I'm a huge fan of Astroworld. I'm a huge fan of Travis Scott as an artist. And I don't know if you feel the same way about Travis Scott loving his music, or to what extent you're a Travis Scott fan. I'm a big fan, And I wanted to ask you, what are your thoughts on the situation with Travis Scott and also the separating the art from the artist? Is it possible to do that in general? Have you thought about that at all with the situation with Travis Scott and Astroworld? What were your initial thoughts when you first learned about it, and how have your thoughts in that area progressed over the past few months?
It's a tough question for sure. I think the question of separating the art from the artist is always a hard question, because there's so many different variables that go into it. But I think specifically with the Travis Scott situation, I mean, it's a travesty what happened. Like, I genuinely don't feel like he had any malintention. Live Nation didn't have any bad intentions, because they were just bringing people together for a great concert. But regardless, they have a responsibility, and Travis Scott has a responsibility. Live Nation has a responsibility. And I think it got really complicated because the people, like Travis Scott has been developing this brand of the rage for like since he started, and he like, you know, that when you're going to a Travis Scott show, you're gonna rage, and he's gonna rage, and he's not gonna hold anything back. It's one of the reasons why he's an incredible performer. But at the same time, he has to communicate that to his fans, what the rage means, and where that threshold needs to be set.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it's not like mosh pits are a new thing. Like, Rage Against the Machine concerts back in the day were insane, or heavy metal concerts down at like a small rock venue. Like, people go nuts. They're literally like throwing elbows, but they're not dying. And I think it's because in mosh culture, there's an understanding of what it means to mosh. If you go and you rock somebody and they fall down, you pick them back up. But these 14-year-old kids who are at the Travis Scott show don't necessarily, they haven't grown up with mosh culture, which I haven't. I mean, I've been in mosh pits, but like, I wouldn't, like, it was really started back in like the 90s and stuff. And I think that that's kind of where it got, like, some of the issues arose, is it's just a bunch of kids who don't understand what that really means. Same way as, like, if you go to a rave, like, real proper raves have like guidelines that you have to read before you go. And it's about respecting the people at the party. It's about, if you're taking drugs, like, doing it responsibly, or if you're dancing, like, not being a creep on girls. And like, that stuff is like, I've been to parties where that's actually communicated, and talking about it now, like, that's something that I would love to add some sort of language into the events I do. So yeah, I think that those are some of the variables that, like, they could have controlled. Probably, like, Live Nation could have identified that Travis Scott is somebody who creates that energy, and they could have communicated prior to the event. So they're totally responsible for a lot of what happened. So I guess that's my kind of thoughts on the Travis Scott situation. I guess I am a fan of his music too, and with the art versus the artist, it's a tough question, because like, I personally still listen to Travis Scott, but I'd also totally,
me too. Like, I fucking love Travis Scott.
Yeah, and I would totally understand if somebody was like, what he did was irresponsible and I don't want to listen to him anymore. I would totally understand that.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because the art versus the artist question has been brought up with artists like Michael Jackson, that I know is an iconic artist, but I don't personally listen to. I don't seek out Michael Jackson. If he's playing on the radio, if someone's playing him in the gym, I'll listen to it passively. Like, he's an example of, like, I'm a passive listener of Michael Jackson, but I know that his music is great, but I'm not a personal fan of his. So when people talk about him, I've never really had a dog in the fight with the art versus the artist. And this is the first time where I've, like, it's not nearly as as brutal of a charge as Michael Jackson. I'm not comparing Travis Scott to Michael Jackson at all, but it forced me to at least think about it, like at least pose the question: if this was worse, if 100 people died or 1,000 people died, like what would I think of Travis Scott and how would that affect my listening? And I actually, this was another thing that I talked to Gavin about, because for those of you may hear the episode with Gavin Chops that will come out shortly before the episode with Ben. Gavin Chops is the drummer for Chelsea Cutler on tour, and he's also one of the co-founders of Pack Records and Pack Management. And so I was interested in his perspective as a person who's on stage during a live performance. And from him, he was saying that they can't really hear the crowd, that you can see the crowd, and the lighting varies by venue. So sometimes you may only be able to see the first couple rows of people, and then it's just blackness. You can talk to the people that are working the venue and the people that are on stage with you, so the performers, you can communicate, and there's different channels. And knowing that information now, it seems like the venue, it's very hard for an artist to adjust venue by venue. If you're playing festivals or if you're going on tours, if you're playing in 30 different cities, it's hard to draw up strategic plans for crowd control as an artist to worry about that type of stuff. And especially when you're just trying to make sure there are no technical difficulties with the performance and that everything goes according to plan. I don't really see the artist and the artist team being the one to worry about venue strategy with preventing injuries and deaths. To me, it seems like, as I pick my nose, the solution to, or at least a partial solution to what happened at Astroworld, would be for the venue to identify pressure points to where things build up when it's at a certain capacity. So certain signals where, okay, we see this in the crowd, so last time this happened, people were hurt, or there's people watching the venue with how people circulate. You identify high risk locations in the venue where people have suffocated and you actually have people watching, and those are communicated on channels to people performing and the team of the people performing. And I have no idea what type of strategy goes into a Live Nation performance, or just a performance in general from the venue side. But it seemed like there was almost no thought of, if people start to die in the crowd or people start to need medical attention in different areas of a crowd with 50,000 people, how do we get to that crowd? Does the show stop? Do we signal Travis Scott? And do we give him a script to say to the crowd? Because you're performing, you have adrenaline in the moment, you have an instrumental, you're worried about the song, you're worried about making it good for the people that are in the crowd. You may not even realize that people need help because it's just a sea of people at that point. I feel like the venue needs to signal and have a communication strategy on their own end and pay attention to those pressure points and signals, and then have some sort of script that you can hand over to the performer and say, if this happens, we will tell you, okay, it's time, you need to say this now. And you have something that says, in your own words, hey guys, the performance is going to stop now. People need medical attention. Sorry for the inconvenience. And then that lets people know that, okay, we need to make room. But it just seemed like I initially was very angry just at Travis Scott because of the way that the videos portrayed him, in where it looked like he was looking at people that were being carried away in stretchers. And again, that could just be the angle. Like, he's performing out to a crowd of 50,000 people and then someone's being carried away and he's looking at them, but really he's just looking out at the crowd and he doesn't even see that shit. Mm-hmm. But the more I think about it, the more responsibility has to be on the venue to hand over a strategy for the artist that is interchangeable for any artist that goes through there. So Live Nation they should have a plan for 30,000 to 50,000 people shows, whatever the threshold is. this is the venue, these are the pressure points, we're going to have a team look out for it. If something happens, we let someone on the team know that will take care of it. If it gets past a certain point, we notify the artist. The artist says this to the crowd or something like this, and then this is what happens. And the show may not happen after that point, or it will get back to a point where that occurs. And it didn't seem like that type of communication was in play at all.
Yeah, it's interesting because how you answered, like everything you just brought up, that's talking about what is the protocol in the moment of it happening, and what is, like, how do we react once this traumatic thing is happening. Whereas how I approached it was more on the foresight side of things. So I guess it is kind of like two different conversations. And I think that's why it's important for the overall ethos of the artist and of the venue to be understanding that there is a lot of risk here. And especially when it's an artist like Travis Scott, if he's going to be talking, if his brand is the rage, then it's important to have that foresight, which is not easy by any means. But I think, like, you see, recently there was a situation with Jack Harlow where he was performing, and there was a person in the crowd who, I don't know if they were, like, what happened, but they passed out. They needed medical attention, and he stopped the show, and he would not start playing again until that person had medical attention that they needed. And I don't know Jack Harlow or Travis Scott personally either, but I think that based on, like, what I do know about Jack Harlow, like, he maybe has more of an ethos of, like, wanting to care for his fans, which I don't want to say Travis Scott doesn't care for his fans, but I think even if you can't see in the crowd, like, your general mentality around it, your intention going into the show is important.
Yeah, I mean, having the artist care about the fans certainly helps in a way that you could get past. You don't even have to think about if the artist cares for the fans or not, if you have a protocol that falls back on certain things happening. So if X happens in the venue, we do Y. And you're basically just telling the artists, if, we need to do this, or their team, we need to do this, and it may get to a point where we have to stop the concert. So essentially you take the feelings out of it with protocol. The protocol doesn't care about your feelings. And again, I have a complete outside perspective. I don't know, someone may be listening to this podcast that works at a venue and it's like, you're a fucking idiot. Like, that's not how it works, blah, blah, blah. Like, the artist has to do it. I don't know. I'm just simply thinking about if you drew out the shape of a venue and you took away the music and you put 50,000 people in that venue, just in that space, and I told you, okay, here's the shape, I don't tell you what's going on, there's going to be 50,000 people in there over the course of 5 hours. There are going to be some people in that group that are very extremely aggressive. There are going to be people in that group that are semi-aggressive, and there's going to be some people in that group that are very passive. Would you be surprised if 10 people died in that group based on the information I just told you? Like 50,000 people in a grid.
I mean, yeah, the odds are definitely not shocking if that's the case.
Yeah, and it's like you add a concert into that, and you add emotion, and you add people doing, like, moving, and, like, I feel like in that situation, you have to almost expect that if we don't do anything, if we don't have any protocol, someone's going to die. So we need to have a protocol to step in that can handle slight discomfort to injury to death. And it's just something I'm thinking about, like, in terms of Travis Scott, and not to cut you off.
No, I think the protocol is totally important, and my opinion would be the protocol is important, and the foresight is important too, and you need the foresight in order to have the protocol, because it's music and it's a special experience. We should do everything in our power to make sure that people walk away from that on both their feet.
With that being said, this will be the first Mosh Pit live podcast. When I have conversations at a venue, I will have the very awkward moment of saying, okay, I know there's no music playing now, guys, but for the next 5 minutes, I will allow the first 2 rows to be open for moshing, should you feel the need during this conversation. And I'll have a protocol. If people are getting too wild during this conversation with Neil deGrasse Tyson or whatever, please tell us on stage and we'll let them know. Stop moshing in this way for the podcast. At Brooklyn Bowl or whatever. The first Mosh Pit podcast Mosh Pit.
You might be on something there.
Pod pit. A pod pit, nice little pod pit. Make a designated area. This is a pod pit. Just know the risks of being inside this roped off area. So something we spoke about before the podcast is you've thrown parties with Adrian Grenier of Entourage fame, one of my favorite shows of all time, Vinny Chase. And I wanted to open this up just to ask you, like, how did that connection happen? That seems like such a cool person to be able to connect with, to throw parties for a good cause. How did that come about? How did you make the link with Adrian Grenier?
So I hate to burst your bubble, but I've never interacted with Adrian directly.
Leave. I'm sure. He's in the closet. He's about to come out right now.
That would be cool.
He's moshing. He's in the mosh designated area.
Yeah, that was a cool connection though, and it was definitely really fun to be able to host an event in his house in Clinton Hill. Basically, it's a studio called SNS Studio, and I connected with them through Clubhouse and a company called the Future Party. So I was actually hosting this event, a monthly networking event at Safe and Sound Studios for the Future Party. And Safe and Sound Studios is essentially this beautiful home that Adrian, I guess, bought a while back, and now he's no longer living in New York, but there's this space, and
he turned it into a studio and an event space.
He turned it into an incredible, like, professional grade studio in the basement, and now this friend of mine who I connected with, Justin and Jonah, are now collectively managing the space for Adrian. And they're doing some really cool things with it. So that's how we got that connection. But it's cool. There's literally like photos of Adrian, and there's like a little shrine to Entourage. So when we were hosting the events, it was fun to be like, look at that.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's cool. Even though he doesn't live there anymore, he kind of opened that space to host events and host parties. That's if I oh, there you go. Beyonce almost dropped Beyonce. She's safe though.
Gotta have Bay.
We can mosh the coasters at some point during the podcast. Mosh Queen Bee with The Weeknd. But no, that's cool. I mean, I hope just getting to the point of owning multiple homes is fucking sick, and then to have one of those homes that is a designated event space to throw parties and do whatever. That I hope that would be the goal of one of my homes that I own, is to just have one open, clear the furniture out, be like, this is just for people to have a good time, this is for people to party, and you can come in and throw a smash if you want to.
Yeah, it's pretty wild, because it's almost like, I always would joke when talking about it that it's almost like real life Entourage, because Justin's a close friend of his, and and Justin's living there and managing the space. And aside from the events, they're also like really making some great music in the basement. But he's got his homie just living in his awesome, like, great house.
That's the goal.
Yeah.
So we talked offline a little bit about meditation and Wim Hof breathing. And I had a little resurgence into breathing exercises. I did Wim Hof religiously during the pandemic for about 3-4 months, and then got away from it, and then got back to kind of improv breathing. Or if you've ever done the Wim Hof app before, and you're listening to this, you take 30 to 40 deep breaths in and out, like, and on the exhale, you hold your breath, and then you take a recovery breath for about 15 seconds. And I got back into that style of breathing, but just experimenting with the different amounts of time outside the app. And so I was curious when you messaged me about it. I wanted to ask you, speaking of cliches, like, what is your journey like? Like, what's your journey with breathing, Wim Hof, and kind of the meditation breathing? I guess it's kind of a cliche the way people talk about it, but I've had unreal benefits from it. So I wanted to know what your journey has been with those practices. It's
definitely been beneficial with all of the meditation, Wim Hof. I guess starting off with my journey with meditation, that's how I kind of led into these other components of learning how to train your mind and being more present. And it started in my sophomore year of college. My mom gave me a book called Success Through Stillness. It's by Russell Simmons, huge music exec. And it was at the time when I was trying to learn how my path into the music industry / my mom's a yoga instructor. So it all, like, I was like, this
perfect combo.
Yeah, it was like the perfect combo for somebody to get introduced into meditation, because it's not an easy thing to get introduced into. So I read the book, I bought into it. And I really off the bat just started doing what he says, which is meditate. He says meditate 20 minutes a day, twice a day. This is Russell Simmons. Simmons. That's a lot of time. So I actually do 20 minutes a day, and I've been doing that since my sophomore year. I started off doing 5 days a week, and now I try to do 7 days a week. And it's not guided. It's just using a mantra, saying rum. That's my mantra.
So you say rum. And how long does one rum last? Is it with your breathing? Is it just kind of
it's varied over time. It aligns with my breathing now. So now that I've started doing the Wim Hof and some other like breathing meditation, now that rum is a bit extended, and I can actually slow it down. And the meditation itself has just been something that, since I've started doing it, has been extremely grounding for me. Throughout college, when exams got stressful or social life got stressful, I was continuously doing it, and that's just really led through into my career, because life is stressful, and when I have that 20 minutes a day to let thoughts enter my head and then pass through my head, I feel that it allows for further periods in the day for me to still have that mentality, because things hit you throughout the day all the time. And if you can let them pass while you're sitting still, then in the real life, it gives you more tools to be able to do that.
Yeah. I've talked about this app on the podcast a bunch of times, but I'll never get tired of it because it's made such a huge impact on my life. The Waking Up app by Sam Harris.
Oh yeah.
He cool. Sends you daily meditations, which are 10 or 20 minutes every day. And then he also has this 28-day ramping up course. But what you were saying about your own form of meditation made me think about the cue that Sam Harris will give often, which is drop everything. And I would describe it as semi-guided, where throughout the 20 minutes, there might be a minute total of talking, but it's dispersed throughout the 20 minutes. So it kind of just feels like every few minutes or so, he's just kind of like poking you a little bit, being like, and come back to, and when your thoughts inevitably drift, which is helpful.
Yeah,
And
I like the guided meditation as well.
And the drop everything cue, I don't know if you've had this experience, but I've found that in the morning, it's incredibly hard to do with my entire day ahead of me. I meditate in the mornings for 20 minutes now. And like you, I also started with 5. I think I started with 3 when I was doing an insight timer app. I remember it was called. And I couldn't even follow 5 breaths in and out. I was just like so sporadic, so all over the place. And so I started with 3 minutes and eventually got to the 20-minute dailies. And when I try to drop everything in the morning, and I have the bullet points, the mental bullet points of my day in front of me, it's so fucking frustrating sometimes. I don't even want to say when it goes well, because meditation is not supposed to be something that you're competing in. But when I have my more centered sessions, it's such a win because I'm able to drop myself into a place where the day becomes now and the bullet points are whatever they are later in the day. And the drop everything cue is it sounds so simple, but it's so fucking hard. Like to sit there even for 5 minutes before your entire day pans out and just go drop everything. And you're thinking about all your thoughts they're popping into your head. You're recognizing those thoughts. Maybe you're paying attention to the darkness in your eyes, the sensations in your fingers. Maybe you're just following your breathing. But to truly drop everything, to me, even for a minute, is a massive win. And when I do it at night, it's so much easier because my day has panned out. So if I do a buzzed meditation after this, which I've done a couple times, like it's just for fun, like, oh, I'm fucked up right now. I'm coming back, my girlfriend's asleep. Like I'll do like 10 minutes of like a just fucked up, not even sometimes like moderately buzzed meditation. I'm just like, having it after my day occurs makes it so much easier to just drop everything. Cause I'm like, like my energy's gone. I don't have shit to do until tomorrow. I can just drop into this moment. Do you feel like you're able to drop things effectively with your form of meditation? The combination of the rum and the vocals and what you're doing with the Russell Simmons style?
I think drop everything is an interesting way to put it. Like I understand the concept of like drop everything. I more think of it as let everything pass, because like when I approach meditation, it's not like you sit down and immediately you just shut off and everything's gone and you're immediately in this moment of stillness. I think the 20 minutes is so important because I have sessions where for the first 15 minutes I'm like, holy shit, like this day's like coming. Oh my God, all of these thoughts are racing. I can't finish this. But by letting those thoughts come and letting them pass, even if sometimes it's only a couple thoughts that come and pass, and that's the maybe easier sessions, but sometimes it's a ton of them. But if you allow them to enter and allow them to leave, you, by the end of those 20 minutes, are feeling in a much more still place. So I think in terms of dropping everything, I think I would maybe consider it more passing, letting things pass.
Yeah, like letting it flow.
Yeah.
When I hear the cue drop everything, I do think of letting things pass. I think of drop sounds like such an instant thing, but it's a reminder that you can, at any point in your day, no matter what stress is running through your body, you are within your power to drop emotions when they're no longer useful. So I think both ends of the spectrum are beneficial when you're you're feeling things and you're letting it run through you. I don't think that letting things pass is outside of drop everything.
No, yeah.
That could apply to the notion of dropping things. I take it more as I'm attempting to drop things within this 20 minutes. Maybe I drop them for 3 minutes that day and I'm truly in a meditative state, which is perfectly fine. That happens a lot of days where my thoughts are sporadic, but I have a moment where I tap into presence. And then what my hope is that I take that feeling of being present and then translate that into my day, where if I'm having a conversation with someone, or maybe I see a stranger and have an interaction, or I'm on the phone, like whatever it is, whenever I encounter a pressure point, whether it's with myself or someone else, that I can tap into that moment that I dropped during a meditation and carry that into real life, which is the ultimate goal. If meditation had a goal, is for me at least, is to translate that into the moments during the day and being able to drop it because you felt what it's like to drop it previously when you are within the bounds of a structured meditation. You can carry the dropping things, you can carry the passing of things within the structure of a planned meditation and to the unstructure and the chaos of life.
When I hear you talk about dropping in that way, it's making me think of, it's almost a similar concept of like, it's allowing you to be more patient.
Yeah, that is something, that is a journey that I will never fully complete, is being more patient with others and with myself, and those two feed off of one another for sure.
Yeah, and it is a journey. It's not, you can be doing it for 10 years, you could be doing it for 20 years, and I think I'll be constantly getting better at it.
So are you okay with getting into why you quit porn? That was something you mentioned during the podcast and something that I've also dabbled in. Are you cool getting into that?
Yeah. I think I've talked about it with friends before, and it's something that kind of feeds off of the meditation journey that I've been on, and just learning new ways to interact with your thoughts and temptations, and being more present, and using and just really, I mean, it's a challenge. It's a challenge. Meditation's a challenge. Doing Wim Hof's a challenge. And over my lifetime, I've had a experience with porn, a relationship with porn, like many of us do, that isn't always healthy. And I think I really started to notice it over the past year during the pandemic, when we were at home all the time, and when things would get stressful and I was looking for a dopamine rush because I couldn't go out to a party and dance, or I couldn't go see friends and have drinks, I would turn to it because I was just feeling stressed. Like, whether maybe it was something that came up at work, and maybe it was something that was coming up with social life, or maybe it was just because I was at home and I was like, damn, like this sucks and I have nothing else to do. So I started to recognize that it was not being used in a healthy way. And I have since then been trying to cut it out of my life entirely. And it hasn't been easy. I'm not 100% there yet. I'm right now, I think my streak's at like 45 days.
Fuck yeah.
So
4 or 5, baby.
4 or 5. I'm shooting for 90, and we'll see what happens at 90. It's not like it's not something that I think was like too majorly negative. But what I've found is, now that I'm on this journey, the amount of time that you can spend during those moments of stress towards positive things, rather than turning to a dopamine rush, because that's
Yeah.
really all it is a dopamine rush.
Yeah.
And what you can use with that time is pretty awesome. Like
Yeah.
if you're sitting there and you're feeling stressed, and just and taking a moment to breathe and to be present, and then letting that thought pass the same way we do in meditation, allows you to go and do, maybe I had something on my to-do list that takes 15 minutes. Now I'm using that 15 minutes to check that off and to progress my life further in a positive way. So
that's something I've heard from people trying to quit various forms of things, whether it's porn or cigs, alcohol, like whatever the vice is that you're trying to drop, is the urge, the impulse comes to you over a very short period of time. So if you can distract yourself or do something else for literally 3 minutes, that is the difference between you falling back into a habit that you're trying to quit, or passing the urge and then forgetting about it for another 3 weeks, and then next time the urge comes back, it's not as strong as the previous time.
Yeah, and it's not an easy thing to let those urges pass.
Yeah.
And at times it can feel like those moments that all you need is a few moments. It feels like forever, but it's a form of becoming a master of your mind. And I mean, I think that, I hope that as I get older and older, I want to be more and more a master of my mind, because the mind is a powerful thing. And if I can have a more healthy relationship, then hopefully I'll reach all of the goals and manifest everything.
Yeah. Yes, that's the goal.
Yeah.
Manifest destiny.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're making me think about my own journey in porn, and I really thought about where I stood with porn outside of the moral landscape, because I'd grown up in Catholic church, Catholic school, where the source of people enforcing habits or taking away habits from their life is guilt. So does this make you feel guilty? And I really tried to remove myself with that from porn. If I'm looking at porn outside of guilt, that this makes me feel bad, that might be something that's been in my life systemically and something built in. So how is porn actually affecting my life from a useful standpoint? Is it taking away from my day? Is it taking away from me as a person? And I had started watching porn, like many guys do, 12, 13 years old, when, what was that? Probably 2005, when the internet was in its not birthing stage, but early stage, where I remember looking up just photos, like literally jerking off to photos before I even got into videos. And videos were like the gold mine. And you go in that more rabbit stage of porn, sporadic stage of jerking off a lot when you're younger. And at least I did. I was doing it much more because I wasn't having sex, I wasn't hooking up.
You're curious.
Yeah, you're curious. You're curious, like, how naked people look. What is all the hype about sex? I hear about it. If I'm going to pretend like I'm having it with my friends, if I want to be able to talk about, oh yeah, like totally, like this chick went down on me 2 weeks ago when we were at that party. If I'm gonna lie about that to my friends because I feel pressure to make it look like I'm getting pussy when I'm not, like, I better at least know what it looks like so I can describe it. So I went from jerking off a lot with porn to being like a few times a week in college, which a lot of people may still think of as a lot. And then a couple years before, everything's like before the pandemic, like BP, AP, before, after. So like a couple years before, 2018, I was in a streak where I was single, where I had been single most of my life. I'm in a relationship right now. I was in a relationship in 2016 for a year, but for most of my life before the age of 27 years old, I was single. And I had noticed that I had not gone on a date in like 6 weeks, had not had sex in a few months, which, I'm fortunate enough to have grown into a confidence where I had done well with the ladies after my sophomore year in college. Like, definitely got more comfortable, more social, was less self-conscious, and was able to have some success. And I noticed, you know, I was in this dry spell, and my first self-imposed drought from porn came from the idea that, okay, I haven't had sex in 2 or 3 months. I'm not going to see pussy or tits at all unless it's in person. I impose that boundary on myself where I'm like, I'm not going to give myself the pleasure of seeing a naked woman's body unless it's in person. I'm going to take it away. Just see if that incentivizes me, works in the background in some way where it's like, porn, like, this doesn't exist in a digital form. Maybe I'll see an ad on the subway or something, like I'll happen to see something catch my eye, but I'm not going to seek it out actively. I'm going to be a passive consumer of porn for a little bit. Passive listener to porn. And like 2 weeks later, like, went on a date and ended up hooking up with this girl and had a great connection. And that continued with that person, but then also continued where I wasn't looking at porn and I was having these in-person interactions, and I felt like my in-person interactions were stronger and happening more frequently, because often I would lose motivation from going out on a date because porn was an option. You could see tits and ass whenever you want, and once I pulled that away, that gave me the incentive to, okay, if I want to see this again, it has to be in person. So let's figure out other options here. Let's go out. Let's be more social. Let's do this. And it didn't really come from like a moral standpoint. And then the second portion of my life where I was taking a hiatus from watching porn was recently, but this was a different type of hiatus where I took a break for like a 4-month streak from watching any video porn. But I allowed myself, you know, as a podcasting connoisseur, the thought entered my mind, what if I listened to porn sounds? And the impetus for this was because I had a few times watching porn where, and this is when I was still on TikTok. So this is like a year and a half ago, like a year ago, I felt similar leaving my jerk off sesh on Pornhub to when I signed out of TikTok and deleted the app from my phone. I was like, I just scrolled through a bunch of videos for 25 minutes.
Experienced the dopamine rush. Feel like shit.
Like, this is not that different from watching TikTok. I can't even watch like the same video for more than 2 minutes because I'm just like, all right, like, saw it, on to the next. Like, this is desensitizing me to content on TikTok, and this is desensitizing me to sex on Pornhub, just like flipping through these videos. So I was like, all right, well, I do listen to a lot of podcasts, and I listen to them for streaks of, 30 minutes in the morning while I'm stretching and doing dishes, and then I'll go for walks. Like, I'll walk over the Brooklyn Bridge and listen to a 2-hour podcast. Like, will I feel the same sense of unpeacefulness and content urgency if I'm just listening to porn? And I didn't. Like, literally just like pick a sound bite, and it's literally just audio recordings, and just like kept it going, and it allows you to imagine whoever you want to imagine. There's no video aspect to it, so I'm not saying that that's any better or worse than video porn. I don't know. Just for me, experimentation wise, I realized that taking out the video aspect porn for me took away a lot of that TikTok-esque scroll feeling of shit where you leave TikTok for 30 minutes and you're like, I just wasted 30 minutes of my life. Like, I didn't feel like I wasted 30 minutes of my life when I was just listening to it, because I was like, oh, like, I just listened to the same track, got what I wanted. I was in, I was out. Don't feel like a shitbag for whatever reason. The audio only experience was superior in that sense. And I just felt like talking about that because I rarely hear that perspective. Like, porn is always packaged as video and audio, but what about just audio? Does that have the same effect on people's brains and like that addictive like scrolling aspect?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that you are comparing porn to TikTok in that way. And I think it's incredible that you're experimenting with these different ways of having a relationship with porn and really just trying to figure out how to be the best version of yourself, and how does it tie into your lifestyle in the most healthy way, because that's really what all of it's about at the end of the day, is just being the best person that you can be for yourself and for the community and the people around you. And I think that porn, when you're viewing it from the age of 12 years old, and as you're viewing it, you start off with the photos, like you said, and then it leads to certain types of videos, and then it gets even more graphic. That creates a false sense of reality, and that's where it starts to become unhealthy. And that's where I think there's some comparison between also wanting to minimize screen time and not wanting to be on social media as much, because social media also creates a false sense of reality. So it all kind of ties into just wanting to be the best person that you can be in real life with real humans, and being compassionate and caring for those people and in those situations.
Yeah.
And I think that there is, in the quitting porn community, there is kind of like you say no to porn's bad, but it's not always that way. It's an evolving relationship that, like, I would never bash somebody who does like watching porn, and it's all just about finding what's healthy for yourself and good for you.
Yeah, there's I just did a podcast with a comedian, Mark Normand, and he's a New York City comedian, one of my favorites, and he brought up a quote from he said a wise man, so I'm not exactly sure who said this, but it's an adage. A wise man once said that I love drinking so much that I don't do it every day, and it sheds light on the fact that when people have addictions, they don't really enjoy what they're doing. They have to do it. And people that really love doing something, whether it's having a drink or maybe watching porn or, eating pancakes, whatever it is, like things that can become addictions, food, alcohol, porn. If you really enjoy it, you have space from it. There's a time to do it, and there's time to step back from it. And for whatever reason, I'm in a relationship now, so I'm not watching porn nearly as much or at all for very long streaks of time. But I've found that the audio has a vastly different effect on my psyche and the way that I experience that time than the video and the audio. So maybe there's something there. Maybe I'm weird as fuck and just jerking off to porn soundtracks. But like, I don't know. Like, maybe that is also should be part of the conversation.
There's a whole app for it.
Yeah.
Like, there's a whole.
Is it really?
Yeah. I can't remember. I think it's like Diaspora maybe. I've heard of it. I haven't experienced it, but yeah, there's an app for audio porn.
Sponsor the podcast.
Yeah,
you're out there. Reach out. I'll use it.
You're not alone there.
Yeah.
So I think there's definitely something to it. Maybe.
So I came across a response on an AMA Reddit, an Ask Me Anything Reddit, with Slash of Guns N' Roses.
Oh.
So some background. Slash and Axl Rose of Guns N' Roses have had a feud for over 20 years, or they had a feud for over 20 years. The genesis of that feud is debated, but that's not really the important thing. And then Slash recently did an Ask Me Anything on Reddit, And someone wrote to Slash, "Hey Slash, can you speak to what was the catalyst that led you and Axel to bury the hatchet? I've seen you guys 3 times on your last 2 tours, and I've been blown away each time. Hard school rocks, and I'm very much looking forward to your new music." And Slash's response was this, and only this. He writes, "The catalyst that led me and Axel to burying the hatchet was just the 2 of us talking for the first time in 20 years. So I wanted to ask you, is there a situation in your life where you held a grudge much longer than you needed to? Maybe not 20 years, but maybe for months, even a year, that could have been released by simply talking or reaching out to the person?"
Wow, that is a really cool question. I haven't really, I know this might sound like kind of bullshit or not, but I haven't really held many grudges over my life. I think I've had a pretty innate, like, positive outlook on grudges. I growing up, my mom had multiple friends that they got into arguments with, and then they never were friends ever again. And I don't know, maybe subconsciously as a kid, I kind of saw that and I was like, this doesn't seem worth it. So I'm also a non-confrontational person, so I try to avoid conflict at many costs as possible.
Just so listeners know, Benny punched me in the face twice before the podcast recorded. Yeah, and we're still friends. Yeah, we talked about it.
So yeah, no, I can't really, I really haven't held many grudges, and I don't intend to. I think that it's unnecessary energy that is just builds up inside of you and doesn't go away, because unless you have that conversation like they did, it's going to stay in there.
Yeah. I've nowhere near been as fluid with the grudges that you've had, because I've held some great grudges in my day between me and people that I cared about. But when I was reading this post on the AMA about Slash and Axl Rose's burying the hatchet, and he just said, yeah, we spoke for the first time in 20 years. It really is fascinating to me now that I'm looking back on the grudges that I've held throughout my middle school, high school, college career, even a little bit post-college, that literally opening your mouth and saying words to someone is a release valve for a grudge, and often the most effective release valve for a grudge. Yet we build up a story in our head while the grudge is occurring that is not an option. It's like if you were on a ship, that cliche moment on a ship where in a war movie it gets fucking missiled and you're in the control room and it's filling up with water, and it's like, oh my God, like how the fuck do we get out of here? We're so stressed out. We're going to die. We don't know what's going to happen. Being able to talk to someone is like the door right in front of your face that you refuse to pull. It's like, I am stressed out. I feel myself drowning. I feel this building up in my life. And this door is right here. But maybe you're so blinded by your own grudge, which I've definitely been in the past, that door isn't even an option. You're seeing so red that you can't even put your hand out to pull it, because it's you can't visually perceive it, but or emotionally perceive it. But then there are these spaces within the grudge where it clears for a little bit, and maybe you reach out, maybe you don't, or maybe it goes on for 20 years like it did in this situation. But it is fascinating to me. Like, we know the answer as an outside perspective. If you've watched 2 people hold a grudge against each other, you watch 2 people in a relationship have an issue, or friends or whatever, you know that things will be solved by talking. And solved doesn't always mean that you'll maintain the friendship or maintain the relationship, but there will be some sort of release and a moving forward. We all know the decision, but when you're in it, when you're actually the one who's going through it, it's like it disappears for a little bit, and you're like, that door is not fucking there. Like, I'm just gonna fucking like run through this shit and just hope that I win, when really you could just open the fucking door and get out at any time.
Yeah, and I think in order to open that door, you have to let your ego go a little bit. And the ego is a dangerous thing that I think probably plays into, or I know it plays into why people hold these grudges, because your ego wants you to win.
What are your favorite drugs to listen to music on?
I mean, I love listening to music after a couple drinks, a little pot. And those are probably the two for sure. And one of my favorite things to do is to go out, and I take the L home. I live in Greenpoint, so I take the L home, and then I have this walk from the L through McCarran Park. And after a couple drinks, throwing on some headphones, walking by myself in the fresh air, I will dance the whole walk home.
Fuck yeah.
And that's probably like one of my favorite ways to listen to music, just walking down the street.
And that's as you're punching people in the face, right?
Yeah, of course.
That's the way you got to do it. No, but that's awesome. You're the person that's starting the dance. You're practicing opening that dance floor. You know?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's one of the best ways to release energy.
If you could only drink or smoke weed and listen to music, which one would you pick? If you can only do one if you could only, not that you can't do one for the rest of your life, but for the rest of your life while listening to music, you could only choose booze or choose weed. Which one would you choose to combine with music?
Oh, definitely weed. I think I have a much healthier relationship with it. It's not addictive. I have alcoholism in my family, and I think that weed would, if I had to, outside of the music, if I had to choose one or the other, it would definitely be my choice.
What's a song that instantly puts you in a good mood?
Mac Miller's, it could be any Mac Miller song, but I love, it's a good question. I love Questions by Mac Miller with Lil Wayne. That's a good one. And
anything by Blue Slide Parks is such a fucking
Blue Slide Parks, great. Macadelic is probably one of my favorite by him.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's definitely a go-to. Lately, Still Woozy. Still Woozy's recent album, if I just want to be in a good mood, I just throw that on.
Still Woozy, what type of music is he's kind
of like indie funky rock.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's not rock. It's like indie. I'd say indie funky pop more, rather than rock. But he kind of like raps a little bit, and he's just got these like, it's really groovy.
The answer I put down, strangely enough, is Soundtrack to My Life by Kid Cudi.
Oh, nice.
You can't see that on camera, but I put it down before the conversation. You can zoom in and call me out. But yeah, Soundtrack to My Life was the answer for Kid Cudi, but it could largely be a lot of Kid Cudi.
I was gonna say
Up and Away.
Up and Away. Mr. Rager is definitely that like want to feel good track. Yeah. There's a lot of them.
So I have a couple deeper questions as we leave off. Not that the other questions haven't been deep or that we haven't gotten deep, but I have a few existential questions that pick up Beyonce. We can't. She keeps trying to live and breathe, get free. Yes. So these are tangentially related to music, but not directly. So researchers at MRIT in Australia, a university in Australia, have found a way to change stem cells into bone cells by blasting them with high frequency sound waves. And changing stem cells into bone cells is usually a very tricky and painful process, but this using sound waves has allowed them to convert it in a way that's more seamlessly. And this is a quote from the article that says, Yep. We can use the sound waves to apply just the right amount of pressure in the right places to the stem cells to trigger the change process, says Leslie Yao, the lead researcher on the study. Our device is cheap and simple to use, so it could easily be upscaled for treating large numbers of cells simultaneously. It's vital for the effective tissue of engineering. So, with that being said, with using sound to literally transform the way that cells grow in the body, I wanted to ask you, what's a way that music and working in the music industry has caused you to grow in some way?
That is a cool question. I think music has given me purpose in life in a lot of ways, and we keep bringing up cliches, but I think that's what a lot of people would say. But I've found that through music, we can create positive change and break boundaries, and my goals with music is to do that. So I think even at a really young age, listening to music and hearing the lyrics of different hip hop artists who I listen to, or hearing lyrics of soul songs that my mom would put on, it subconsciously created my values that I live life by. So that is now something that I've realized, and now something that I want to help continue to spread to other people.
Yeah. I was thinking about the way that music has changed me, and I haven't worked in the music industry, but I love music and I love the artists that I love. And something that I kept thinking about was that music is a bridge for the unbearable. And if I trace back the seemingly unbearable moments in my life, the things that I can't see myself getting through, I turn to music to get me through that. I love podcasts, and I listen to podcasts when I have podcasts that I listen to without doing anything, so it's not in the background. I also have podcasts I listen to when I'm doing the dishes or I'm stretching out in the morning, so it's largely an activity that goes alongside the things that I am going to do anyway, task-based listening. Music can also be like that, like with working out or going on a walk, but I turn to music in ways that I don't turn to other content when I feel like I can't make it through something with an anxiety attack, or just a stressful moment in the day where I'm like, I can't picture the solution to this problem. I need to fucking just listen to a couple songs and then come back to it. Tragedy in the family, or just like watching tragedies that go on in the world. I had a friend that took his own life a few years ago, and the first thing that I did was go outside and listen to a song by Lewis Capaldi. And I could hear it in my head. I'm blanking out on the name of the song. I've listened to it countless times, but I think it might be called Somebody to Love by Lewis Capaldi. One of his most streamed songs, but in those moments, I turn to music more than anything else. It's like it makes getting through things seem more realistic in a way. It gives you that bridge of unbearability where you're about to go through something that you can't picture yourself getting through, and then music is like if you were gonna jump over a bridge, if you were gonna jump over a space, like when cars speed up and you try to like get over that fucking gap, like in a Fast and the Furious movie, and you look at it and you go, I can't fucking get through this. I feel like music is that extra energetic boost that maybe extends the platform by a foot so you can barely land and make it through the other side. Your car's still going to get jacked up. You're still going to get fucked up by it. But music and music artists, whatever that song is for you or series of songs, is going to help you get through and recover, even if you get badly beat up in the moment, once you make it to the other side.
Yeah. Music can help you get through things. It can help you learn new things. It can change your perspective. It does a lot.
To bring it full circle with Kid Cudi as we end off, one of his most sung lyrics is from Soundtrack to My Life. And it goes, I try to think about myself as a sacrifice just to show the kids they aren't the only ones who up at night. And in the documentary, A Man Named Scott, which I did not know we were going to talk about, but that literally the last thing on the end of the paper.
It.
Yeah, we manifested it. Yeah. On the edge of the paper, bring things full circle. He says about Soundtrack to My Life, about that lyric, in particular, on A Man Named Scott, he says, that's truly what it was. I sacrificed the privacy of my life and put my story out there to help others. So I wanted to ask you at a deeper level, what is the story that you hope to leave behind with Benny Presents and your work, your relationships and being in general, that the world will associate with you? What is the story you hope to leave behind?
It's a story of not taking life too seriously and having fun while also caring and being compassionate and trying really hard to be a good person and to make the world a better place. So I think it's that balance of, I've always struggled with this fear that people don't take me seriously because I love to have fun. I love to joke around. And like, even back, it got to the point where even back in college, people would like, I had a nickname from the older guys in my fraternity where they would call me Simple Ben. And first it was a joke, but it started to really bother me because I'm not simple. I'm a really complex human. And
did that have to do with Simple Jack, the Ben Stiller character?
I think, it probably did. And that's part of what bothered me. And I guess I want to be able to create a community and experiences for people where you can let loose and have fun while still being a impactful member of society.
Yeah. Well, I will say, as a friend and someone who has experienced the platforms and the parties and the experiences as a whole that you've curated, there are a lot of complex things that go into that, but the simplicity with which you present it is beautiful and it brings people together. So I would say to those guys in your fraternity that simple is actually a compliment, because the human mind, the human experience is so complex. If you come across someone that does good in the world and has purpose and does cool shit, and it happens in a simple way, the world perceives them as a simple person. In my view, that is an art form, to come across something as simple, because it inspires other people, other people to grasp onto it and say, this is attainable. It may take a lot of hard work, and if it's anything worth achieving, it will. But simplicity, in my view, is an absolute art form, and people who are able to do things in that manner deserve a lot of respect and credit. So I would take that as a compliment.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it's a really, really good point. There is a positive outlook on simplicity, for sure.
So before we end off, can you plug everything again, where people can follow you, upcoming events, buying tickets, following Instagram, things like that? And this will all be linked in the podcast description, wherever you're listening to this, Apple, Spotify, or watching this on YouTube. This will all be in the links to go check it out.
Yes. Go find me on Instagram. You can search my name, just Ben Marienthal. If you, for my personal account, hit me up there anytime. I love talking music. If you're looking to get into the industry, I take random phone calls all the time, pay it forward. But also go check out Benny Presents. The Instagram page just was created literally yesterday. We got a big event coming up on March 19th. So go check out the ticket links for that. It's going to be a lot of fun. And yeah, follow the journey, tap in. I would love to meet you.
Hey guys, this is a quick reminder to check out Auxoro Premium, the best deal in premium podcasting. On Auxoro Premium, you gain access to bonus episodes, the unlicensed therapy series, the ability to submit topic suggestions for the podcast, exclusive Ask Me Anything episodes, and the entire premium catalog for only $5 per month. Go to auxoro.supercast.com, that's AUXORO.supercast.com, to join the premium gang today.